Hello, and welcome to At Your End Step. My name is Morgan, and I'm here with Mike.
Hello.
And we've done a fun-filled episode for you folks this week. Lots of stuff going on since we last cast. We obviously just got, done with our entire set review for Ravnica Allegiance. And a lot of stuff has happened in that week where we technically didn't record. So lots of community stuff to talk about, and then a couple tournaments. So we've got our first, taste of Standard as it stands from the Open that happened, which was a Standard only tournament, which is like the first one they've had of its kind of caliber in a very long time. And then we had a limited GP as well, GP New Jersey or Magic Fest New Jersey, whatever. Who cares?
Watsy doesn't.
No one at WotC does. We already know that.
The joke's already firing off.
Yeah, clearly. But let's get started off with our community topics, because the first one we want to talk about is a big one, because we also had a ban and restricted update that happened the Monday after pre-release.
Yes. And
the change that they made is to ban Crack Clan Ironworks.
Ding dong, Ironworks is gone. See, that one actually works pretty well.
It's pretty good. And there's a lot of tension onto what was going to happen with this sort of deck, basically. And I think people were wise to the fact that it was going to get hit with something, but I think the jury was still kind of out on what actually gets banned. And they decided to be, pretty surgical about it and ban the Ironworks and not affect things like Ancient Stirrings decks or Mox Opal decks. But in their article, they definitely talked about how those cards are still definitely on a watch list, per se, because they were in contention as being potential targets for a ban. And they decided this time to, like I said, be surgical about it and not try to affect more of the metagame by banning one of those cards. I think in the long run, those cards are still stupid powerful, even if the deck building restrictions around them kind of tries to keep them in check. But the more cards you introduce, it's bound to happen that those cards are just going to go over a limit at some point in time.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I will say this has been maybe the quietest banning I can remember. Right, like people knew. Like there was not this. People didn't. It wasn't like with Splinter Twin or anything else where people were like, no, this was, yeah, okay. Like, we get it. Let's move on. That I thought that was pretty telling in general. Like, the Magic community, as it is currently doing even now, has a tendency to roar loudly when it feels wronged, and it didn't seem to feel wrong this time. So
no, like you said, I think a lot of people kind of saw the writing on the wall for this one, and I think a lot of people are genuinely happy that it was just Ironworks that was banned, and nothing else. I think if we saw an Ancient Stirrings get banned, you would have had a lot more people be truly upset. You would have upset so many people in the Tron metagame that there would have been a large group of people that would have feasted on all the Tron players' tears, and all the Tron players' tears just crying forever and ever and ever. all the sad Karns, all the Michael Jordan face Karns that would have existed on the Twitterverse would have crashed the entire platform. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think that Modern wasn't in a bad place, and it wasn't like, yes, we had GP Oakland, which stands as a beacon, but even they say we don't base results off of one tournament finish. This is more about what Ironworks does to tournament Magic. I played the team Open in Columbus. There are almost every single team that did well had at least one Ironworks player, and I gotta tell you, the round turnaround is rough. Right?
Yeah.
It's not only them. Okay, I have a video of three. Have the same team we're all playing Jeskai Ascendancy combo at the same time, because I assume they enjoy nothing in life makes them happy.
They wanted to get the most Magic for their money, so they wanted to play every minute in 10 rounds, 10 turns, 5 turns, excuse me, of Magic. That's just what they wanted to do.
Yeah, it's probably true, but I think Ironworks, if you're gonna ban Second Sunrise in the name of this, then that's just where we're at. So
yeah, I mean, they even mentioned in the article that it took advantage of a obscure rule of Magic that is hard to explain sometimes, and it just didn't feel right to continue existing in the metagame.
It also coincided with a rule change that I thought was kind of interesting, that we can talk about here in a little bit, about looping that they sort of tried to address, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
I do want to make one more mention. They did have one more note in the ban about a different format, and that was Pauper. And they at least made mention that they are currently monitoring the Gush foil combination.
Interaction, yeah.
Because it's real gross. It's
Yeah.
real gross. So I think that's at least interesting. Like, it's like when the all-seeing eye, Gush and foil put the ring on and it's looking at you. Dead eyes staring.
I mean, Pauper has the benefit of just being, in general, less played. It's, prominence is Magic Online, and that's where you're going to see most of it. All the action happen there. So it probably has the benefit of having broken things exist within it for an amount of time longer than something like a Modern or something like that. Because if there was something as good as like foil Gush which is absurd to think about, but something as good as that within Modern, it would be rectified a lot quicker, I think.
So I don't disagree with you, but I think there are some like angles to exploit that. One, like Pauper's mostly played in leagues, so when they give us a list that we only see the one, they do get to see the number of like.
True.
So they can literally from behind the scenes just like search foil and then start looking. And I do think that some of the decks that have been more broken and egregious in Modern, something even like Ironworks, for example, it's not a fun deck to pilot on Moto. Like that's something to remember. Like the meticulous combo decks like that, in paper you can like your opponent can go, okay, I get this. It's just like that person who gets tilted. Used to get tilted when you played Splinter Twin and you had to make 30 copies. Like that dexterity is not fun to do. So that diminishes the number that you would see from Moto. So yes, you have that backed in paper, but I think like a combination like foil Gush goes in Pauper, you will see a lot more lists a lot more quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So at least interesting. It wasn't like Peregrine Drake, which immediately got the axe. So at least it's not that broken. But it does seem like they should stop giving disgusting blue cards to to those decks in Pauper.
There's only so much that they could really do to like prevent that, I think. It comes with the why did we get foil at common? Because they made it for Ultimate Masters. So like their primary like thing is making Ultimate Masters a good draft set, and they put that in there and they put it at common. Like sometimes you have to make sacrifices to design your set.
Those things are also done to push Pauper. They have said that before. They push Pauper, they push Cube. So I agree with you, and like I think they do that sometimes, and they're just like, let's see. Peregrine Drake felt like a let's see, and it was a quick no go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And foils less so, but it's not like they didn't know. It's not like they're testing Pauper. I agree with you, but it's not like they didn't know. Like they know what they're doing.
I'm not saying they aren't cognizant of it, but it's more of like I would say like a tertiary sort of goal.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Like I think Cube is secondary for sure, but I think Paupers might be a tertiary at this point in time, where it's just like, we'll see what happens, and we don't ignore it. Like that's all the reassurance that you need as a Pauper player. I think is like we're not ignoring this. But next up, we actually have a change in a card in Standard, and a few other things. So we have some Oracle updates on Ajani's Pridemate. They're actually removing the May from Ajani's Pridemate. It says on the card, whenever you gain life, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Johnny's Pridemate, and now that is no longer. You must. That is an escapable option.
So what's interesting about that is they said that Johnny's Pridemate was designed under the former rules for triggers.
Yeah, for basic triggers.
So that essentially it wasn't, when May wasn't designed to be that way. I don't know that I fully buy that explanation because like there's still a difference between a you may and a not may on cards even in that time period. So it sounds like a bit of a cop-out. They do suggest though that it's going to help out in plays in digital spaces, specifically like Arena, where Ajani's Pridemate sees a lot of play. It requires a lot of clicks even in singular turns. So
yes, that is definitely not, because there are very small cases where you would not want to do that. You know what I mean? Not saying that there isn't completely. You can build a landscape for that any way you shake it, but specifically for I think Arena and Magic Online. Magic Online is probably a little bit better because you can like auto yield or always yes to triggers now with some of the updates that they've had. So it's probably a little bit easier, but just not having to worry about it for Arena, it makes complete sense. It also is specifically interesting because we did get from Gavin Verhey, I don't know if WotC officially announced it, but we are confirmed to get Challenger decks again.
Right.
And in this article or something else. It says here. and this card is going to be included in an upcoming Challenger deck as well. So it's speculated that there's going to be a more than likely red-white aggro Louis Scott Vargas Pro Tour Challenger deck that's going to be released further down the road, which is kind of an interesting information to extrapolate from this.
That's true.
But it's cool. I think those Challenger decks were a really big hit, in all honesty. And they are going to be based off of, from what Verhey said, I believe, when he had a sit-down interview with the professor from Tulane Community College, that they're going to be based on the Guilds of Ravnica winning lists or top 8 lists or something like that. So I don't know if they really do any modifications for like adding new cards to those lists from newer sets that have come out since that Pro Tour. But I know that the other lists that came out with the Challenger decks were all very, very good and easily, like, you could pick them up and modify them and have a, competitive deck for your FNM. So, interesting stuff. What else is,
just a couple of I'm always intrigued by this, but a couple of fixes on like cards and tenses and the order things go in. So for example, Time Spiral, like the order that you shift zones and things has been reordered. Like the card itself says shuffle his or her graveyard and hand into his or her library, but they want the order to be hand and graveyard. So like just little tense things and stuff like that. I think it's interesting. So if you like the minutia of like how they fix rules, flag bearers get a slight language update to indicate that like you have to do this when you're casting. So like it used to say while choosing targets as part of your spell or activating an ability, your opponent must choose at least one flag bearer. Now it says while an opponent is choosing targets as part of casting a spell they control or activating ability control. So there's this idea of the ordering of it a little bit. So it's not a big deal, but it's kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. And there's a page on Wizards website that you can. It's called Ravnica Allegiance Oracle Changes, so you can check out all the interesting stuff that they're actually updating.
I do think it's really odd that within the same standard format, we've gotten 2 like functional erratas.
Yeah,
that is odd to me. And I know like obviously they're pushing into Arena hard, but I do say like as a person who like prefers paper, that is weird.
I agree with that. Just for the sheer fact that not everyone has access to this information. Now,
right.
For bigger tournaments, though, I know they do announcements.
That's true.
So it should be covered in any announcement that you have that could contain, like, these standard cards.
Right.
What's the other one that is...
Teferi.
Oh, yeah, because now it's up to.
It was up to 2, so you don't have to.
And
again, that one made sense, too, especially just for warning's sake. Because, like, instead of, like, people getting a warning because it's like, oh, I didn't untap 2 lands. All right, now I got to give you both a warning. Like, now you can just be like, well, you didn't have to. And that's nice.
Yeah.
But it is odd. It's just odd.
And also, like, the Teferi created feel bad situations if you didn't, like, float mana.
Right.
And if you did have any untapped lands on top, because you have to untap your opponent's lands.
Right.
And no one wants to do that.
No.
But yeah, so that is interesting. I think the Teferi one is definitely just because that's how the card should have been printed. That's how it should. I think that's a pure mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Johnny's Prideweight one is a little different, though.
I think so. I think the Johnny's Prideweight, you can really see where this is for Arena.
For God, that rules or explanation where it's like, oh, we made it under old trigger rules. I'm like, yeah, but you guys have gone back and forth on the May. Like, May is a choice. Like, maybe you don't want it to be bigger for X reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. It's weird. So there's more. I think there's more strategic depth. Like I say, strategic. It's corner cases, but it's just weird.
Yeah, I think it just comes to the sheer fact that Johnny's Pridemate was a card that wasn't developed when Arena was a thing. If like Johnny's Pridemate was developed when Arena was a thing, it would have never said May. So that's just how they are wanting to word it now. I don't think you need to construct an excuse for it, but oh well, here we are. So we actually have some policy changes for judging, I guess, judging for Ravnica Allegiance.
Yeah, so. I said for judging, it's like they have changed specifically. They have changed what level of a punishment you get for a very specific set of actions.
Yeah,
and that is bribery,
yeah.
quote unquote. not the card, because Morgan thought it was the card.
Initially I know I read these changes and completely forgot about them, and then I saw them in the show notes. I'm like, what are they changing about the card bribery? Like, that card's always harsh. But it's actually if you try to bribe someone. And the big change is it's not automatically a DQ.
Yeah, so it's improperly determining a winner, and bribery and wagering are now match clauses. They used to be DQs. Like, this is the person who, like, somebody offered you something to scoop, you said no, but you didn't say anything else to a judge, you got DQ'd. Or this is you rolled a die to determine a winner because you didn't know any better, and you got DQ'd. You know what I mean? It's not great.
No, and I imagine this is an out for the people that the judging staff generally feels didn't know any better.
Correct.
And I feel like is there still some leeway if they feel like there's some intent that they could still push for a disqualification.
So if the player knew they weren't allowed to make the offer or roll the die, it's still cheating. They're disqualified, and most people know better. So the judge definitely still has the room to interpret the situation. But this is an out for specifically new players and competitive scenes, because this is a feel bad that definitely happens.
Oh, for sure.
Even when I was judging, that happened. And it's a way to continue to push people to learn. Mm-hmm. Like, DQing someone doesn't push them to learn; it pushes them to quit.
Yeah.
A match loss is punishing, but it's not as bad.
Yeah,
as
you can still continue. I can't tell you how many times that you and I have probably seen somebody just go, "Well, you didn't.
Yeah,
don't say.
No, stop, please."
So hopefully this will negate some of that, but it's still bad. Don't do this.
So the other thing that's interesting here, additionally, players are no longer required to call a judge as soon as they receive an offer. They're still expected to point out the violation, as well with all violations, but not involving a judge won't also get them disqualified for the same infraction. On the flip side, we're tightening up the rules around luring your opponent into the pits. Trying to entice a violation, a draw so bad here, if only there was something we could do, is itself a violation. So the nice thing is, like, if somebody offers, because like that was one of the shady things that before, is that somebody would offer something to you, and then if you didn't say anything, you could both get DQ'd, which is a real feel bad. Well, now you can stonewall that person, but if you are caught being that person who's like, come on, I'm sure, it just like starts playing with their hair, like, I could do something, like
we can figure it out.
I can figure out a way to pay for this pizza. That person's getting DQ'd.
Yeah, no free pizza for that person.
No, just ice cream. Heidi eats cool treats.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by Dairy Queen yet.
No, I just want it. But I like that yet. That's good. That's a good yet.
Yeah. I mean, we got a dream.
Come on, DQ, you've done dumber things. You still serve chicken strips in a basket. You could afford us.
We're a good kid. I'm fairly certain the crowd that we appeal to definitely loves some Dairy Queen.
Yeah, I am rotund enough to make it at least look believable that I eat your ice cream often.
Yeah.
Also, I've eaten your ice cream fairly often.
So what are the other changes we have going on with the rules here?
Just a couple of changes to like how some trigger policies are handled. This is kind of interesting. So I guess I want to be specific with this. So special handling for triggers with default actions is gone. These rules have been around forever. And it turned out nobody liked them all that much. So some of them are really, really punishing, specifically pacts, right? So pacts are now a trigger that you can miss, right?
Yeah.
Which is weird, because if you're a person who reads the card and it says you didn't pay for this, you lose the game, right? Now it's more like, oopsie daisy, I forgot this. Now if you miss a trigger with a default option, your opponent decides if it goes on the stack. So if you thought you were getting out of not dying to your pact, probably not. Your opponent's still going to do that to you.
There are very few super nice guys that'd be like, oh no, you could do that. Because competitive players like free wins, it turns out.
But so now if you miss a trigger with a default option, your opponent decides if it goes on the stack. If it does, you make all the appropriate choices. So also in that section were the cleanup triggers. This includes things like Obzedat, Aetherling, also like Prized Amalgam. These things that they are supposed to come back, they get to. We actually encountered, they started making that ruling with Prized Amalgam. We encountered that in the team open, where a person already announced a delay trigger, and then when they passed to me, that we were like, oh wait, my amalgams. We called the judge, and the judge said that, like, yes, because it's already happened. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So this, when you talk about Obzedat, like Obzedat leaves and tells you it's coming back. So
leaves a note.
Well, but before you would get punished for that. Before it was just like,
Yeah.
nope, gone forever. It's like, well, no, it's going to try and come back the next time it can. Aetherling 2 should try to come back the next. So I think that's a little bit better, a little less punishing for some of those things. I know this. I've already read some people decrying like, oh, this hurts competitive Magic, this and that. Well, in the case of those things, if your opponent already announced the trigger, right, then like they've acknowledged it. So like what you're gaming is a pretty cruddy corner case.
Yeah.
As far as like the packs and stuff, you still get to kill them. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's already been described that like you could like the situation too where like you realize they've missed their pact, then you could just wait a little bit to see if they tap mana on their turn. Just be like, you know what? Yeah, we're going to put on the stack.
Good lord.
So it's interesting. I think like I get that it's frustrating about like that, because like yes, you want them to pay for their pact, and like yes, they should just lose otherwise, but that again, you're playing to a corner case, like this idea of like playing the hope that my opponent forgets. So we'll see if that actually does anything. The other one that's also like that is the Tabernacle of Pendrell
Yeah.
Vale, because like that's a terrible card. It's so bad. The other thing was loops. I wanted to mention loops. So it said essentially,
Brother, may I have some loops?
that's my tummy. Brother, I fit many loop. Anyways, so it said there's an additional paragraph in MTR 4.4 that explains how to handle choices being made in loops. Now there's a reversal here. In the past, if you were making a choice involving a hidden zone, usually your hand, you weren't required to break the loop. But now that choices are similar to actions, if you don't want to make a different choice, you'll have to demonstrate either by revealing or getting judge confirmation that you can't. Otherwise, the loop ends. Now almost anybody can keep a loop, or anybody keeping a loop can be stopped. So this is kind of interesting where it's just like, no, this is a game action. You can't just shorthand it. Like, what did you choose? As opposed to like now granted they banned Ironworks, but just saying like, I'm going to choose this every single time. It's like, okay, like there's 3 steps to get to you choosing that. You can't actually loop that, which I think is interesting. You know what I mean? And that's more in line with, now granted 2 players could just agree. Like you and I could just agree. In the case of like Splinter Twin, we could probably just be like, okay, yeah, you can demonstrate this. But I do think it's interesting when you consider how Moto works, where you can't just like, there's no loop button on Moto where you can just be like, proceed to loop. Like,
You can do.
I take it back. There is a loop button on Moto. It's get up and go get some Fruit Loops.
You can do certain things that allow you to execute that loop easier, potentially depending on what you're actually doing. Because I know, like for Splinter Twin, you can have it select the same target every time now.
That's true.
But certain ones you can't necessarily do that.
So based on that, though, they actually might not be true now with this change.
Maybe not.
That actually may not exist anymore. So that's something to look at. So I thought it was kind of interesting. There's a couple other small things, but nothing crazy. But I think the bribery one is the one that's going to be sort of interesting, where you reduce some of that whole pit in the stomach thing. Now, again, this does require judges to do the due diligence, and I think local events are really where judge communities are going to have to make sure that judges are trained well. I encountered this when I was judging a pre-release. 2 players who were really new, right? Only one of them could get prizes, right? So like, well, let's just like roll a die. I'm not worried about it, right? There's no collusion there, right? No, they're improperly trying to determine a winner, right? But it's because they don't care. They're just having a friendly time, right? But I'm supposed to disqualify them. You know what I mean? Like I am. They did something explicitly, and like Magic has to always be careful there because of the gambling laws in this country. So it feels bad, but sometimes you have to step in and be like, this. So it's nice to be able to go, okay, you both lose. Okay. And that's unfortunate. But
real weird.
But I'm not kicking you out of the tournament.
There you go.
So that's good. So I don't know. Maybe it doesn't actually lead to that less of a feel bad. I don't really know. But here we are.
All right. So next up we have a bit of an issue regarding Rei Sato, who is a member of the Magic, the MPL, and was recently disqualified from a
Grand Prix Prague.
Yeah, from Grand Prix Prague. And people were kind of wondering what the fallout of this was going to be. And it was determined that the player investigations committee determined that the disqualification was valid, and that actions were opportunistic, but not premeditated. nor intended to deceive the opponent.
I disagree with that so much. But anyways, continue.
The investigations committee recommended an official warning, but Sato not be suspended from the DCI. That said, the Magic Pro League players are held to a higher standard in both play and conduct. Therefore, the MPL has revoked Sato's invitation to the $1 million Mythic Invitational at PAX East. So he's still in the MPL. He's not disqualified, but he cannot participate in that $1 million Invitational, which will now only be 31 players.
Ostensibly,
so
I don't know.
Gets a bye.
Well, no, they'll probably just pick somebody else to fill in the pod based on past exploits.
Yes. Yes.
Seem funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to talk. So if you didn't know and I don't remember if we actually talked about this on here or not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
We didn't talk about community stuff for the
the
Paloozas.
So he rushed essentially to his combat step when he thought he had lethal, and like realized he needed to play his land for like his turn to work on his ability to cast whatever spell he had. So like as he was like declaring attackers, then he like casually like played a land, and then continued declaring attackers. And they like asked him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, I needed to play the land, so I just did." Got disqualified.
Yeah.
So when it says the intent wasn't to deceive his opponent, I disagree. Like he definitely just tried to go for it. Like when they asked him what phase he was in, like he's like, "Well, yeah, I was in combat." So like, if he's not trying to deceive his opponent, there, what is he trying to do? That's a lot of silence. I appreciate that.
I don't know how they. I agree with you for the most part. I just wonder. I think like they might be interpreting the word deceive in a very liberal way.
And I agree, but it's just like this. It's like, well, we determined he wasn't trying to make his opponent lose. He was trying to make himself win, but he wasn't trying to make right. Like that's kind of how I read that.
Maybe the actions were taking place. Obviously, not like. He wasn't trying to hide or sneak in a land. He played a land in broad daylight. I don't like. I don't know.
He wasn't. You mean he wasn't doing like the TV nurse pen drop with his land? Like,
yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, he wasn't doing the look. Hey, look over there, land.
That's how you deceive. Oh my God, what's that?
Land
switches the poison. Oh my God.
So like maybe that's where they're trying to get at that. I obviously don't know how everything went down in regards to this, but who knows?
I'm surprised he gets to stay in the MPL, to be quite honest. I don't know much about Risato. I really don't, and I don't say that to condemn him as a person. You said I get that people make mistakes in like high leverage situations, but 32 people get to be in this, right? Like, shouldn't we be like making sure we're holding those people to the highest standard possible? And like, you lost an invite to one of the X championships you get to go to this year. Deal with it. Like, okay,
hey,
do I get to go to the next $1 million Mythic Championship? Well, yeah,
sure,
but not
you
this
sure
one.
Do.
It's like you don't get dessert tonight, but you can have waffles for breakfast. Deal with your punishment.
And you can still play video games all night.
Yeah, exactly.
But no dessert. I mean, they still let Marcio Cavallo be in it, so like,
yeah. Well, yeah, I have issues with that too, though. So that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they just don't care. It took them a decade to actually fully ban Alex Bertoncini. So
get that whole lifetime ban thing going.
So, and I'm not comparing the two. I'm really not.
Obviously not.
But I just think it is interesting that like this does feel like a weird. Like, is this them actually taking an action, or is this them trying to not like disrupt the MPL? Right? Or it's like, oh, this is too early. We can't have somebody kicked off. We investigated and we decide like 2 years from now. Is that the case? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So I guess congrats to the EV gained for all the MPL players who are now won this person the Mythic Championship. Like some Jet Li movie. 31. Do I hear 30? We all get more powerful.
They all got collectively more powerful. That's true.
all of their arena ranks went up. Man, I'm Mythic Tier 1 now.
That's great. Perfect. So speaking of Arena, we actually had a state of the beta that happened, and we kind of got some information on what's going on with Arena within the next season. So so right now we're in preseason, so we're not even technically in a real season. But for season 1 of the arena Magic Arena, they're going to be introducing best of 3 as a way that you can rank up, a way that you can actually what people call ladder in the game, which is I think a huge win because if you take a look at best of 1 as it currently stands, it's bad. It is mainly mono red decks because they're obviously going to have the most advantage game 1 against the field, pretty much.
I got the platinum this week. I've been playing mono blue, and I mean like mono blue from way into last format. Like I haven't updated it all just so I could like get something for packs. I got in the platinum, and I was like, all right, well, let's play a couple games. I played 5 games today. There's 5 very aggressive red decks. I'm a 3-2 against those decks, I want you to know. So I felt pretty good about it.
Yeah.
But it's just like every single turn, it's like, oh, look, turn 1 Fanatical Firebrand. That's good. And honestly, it reminds me of like, I obviously am a big fan of Brawl. It reminds me of what Brawl turned into when you were just trying to game a small meta. In this case, that. So it's either mono red or I'm going to take all the turns.
Yeah, or Nexus.
So I think that's what's interesting. We're going to talk about the Standard Open. I do think like when we talk about how important best of 3 is.
Yeah.
Like those decks that dominated Arena did not dominate the Open.
Correct.
And I think that's hugely telling. And if you want the worlds you want your Mythic Championships, your Pro Tours to like meld with Arena, then they've got to be playing the same Magic. So this is a good change for sure.
I agree with that. I think like all in all, like just a much better way. As cards are designed as they stand now, it is a much better way to play the game of having a best of 3 match rather than a best of 1 match. Just for the sheer fact that there are certain ways that they design cards that give certain archetypes more of an advantage in the field.
Sure. And also sideboarding is a skill. Like sideboarding, building a sideboard, utilizing a sideboard, these are all skills. Like we had this argument about Limited on the Pro Tour. If Limited survived the entire run of the Pro Tour because of its skill, you can't tell me sideboarding is important. Like that's weird. So yeah, I'm glad for this change, and I welcome it. Now I will say, best of 1 does have some perks. The speed of it is pretty great. Traditional drafts, I've enjoying traditional Ravnica drafts, but there is something nice about the ranked drafts where you just like churn through them. Like you're just like, and I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done.
And realistically, I do think when we're talking about draft, I think best of 1, you're not losing that much.
No, you're not,
because you don't necessarily sideboard every draft match.
I don't want to downplay its importance. LSV has been a person who's told you like how important it can be, but
yes,
compared to Constructed, it's not the same.
Right. And like I think even something like Sealed is different. Sealed, I think you can genuinely like sideboard. You just have access to more cards. Like you can switch entire decks.
Right.
You just can't do that in draft.
Right.
You might have a few 1 cards that you switch in and switch out, but you're not necessarily losing as much as you are in Constructed or even Sealed. So I think like when you're comparing things and like people, thinking the sky is falling because best of 1, drafts are going to be coming to paper. Certain stores are going to be able to hold best of 1 draft events that have like their 20-minute best of 1 matches. It's just like it's okay. It's like it's just a thing that they can do for draft. Like.
And for weekly events, like that makes a lot of sense. Like a Wednesday night event, like you can play some Magic and get out. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, I think there's room for both, but I think for ranked, like
for ranked Constructed play, I think you definitely want best of 3.
Yeah.
The other thing they've introduced, and this has already happened, is copy protection. Which sounds weird to to say out loud. Yeah, just let them,
they actually call it duplicate protection.
Yeah, it's duplicate
and they
protection.
double all the condoms in your account.
So duplicate protection, basically what that means, it's easy. They have it, if you open a booster pack from the store from your weekly wins, if you open a rare mythic card that you don't already have, if you were to open one that you already have 4 copies of, you get one that you do not have 4 copies of. Easy as that. And then once you max out on your rares, though that rare turns into 20 gems. If you max out on your mythics and you open a mythic, that mythic turns into 40 gems. Simple as that. Limited packs are a little bit different. That won't affect what you open. but if you draft something you already have 4 of, it turns into gems.
Yeah, it definitely pops at you pretty quickly too. Like the first time it happened for me, like I was like drafting, and like as soon as my draft was over, it was like, you have these gems, and I was like, oh god, thank you, I get it, thank you, I appreciate it.
And then ICRs, which are individual card rewards, have also been affected. If you receive a rare/mythic rare you've already have 4 copies of, the card will be replaced with 20 gems. For rares, 40 gems for mythic. If you receive an uncommon that's upgraded to a rare mythic rare, you already have it, 4 copies of, the card will get replaced with gems, 20 gems, 40 gems. And then all your uncommons that you open and or commons that are over 4 go to Vault Progress, so they eventually turn into
Right.
I guess uncommons all go towards that progression. They don't necessarily say commons, but I don't understand why commons wouldn't contribute to your vault progression.
Yeah,
I assume it's just a minor amount.
I believe they do. So the vault progression is interesting because like you can't unless you can't really see it. Like so the first time that like and the only time that like the vault like has popped for me, I was like, what in the world is this? And I was like, here, you get these things, your vault. And I was like, okay, and then it went away, and I was like, where is this? Where is this mystical vault at? Like,
I don't know why they choose to hide that information, because it used to be visible. You used to be able to see how close you were to opening that vault, and now they've hidden it. And I assume it's because the things that contribute to it are so minor. It is very discouraging to see that bar slowly tick up.
Like,
but it is great to see it open, right? So like you get to see the exciting parts, not the boring, depressing parts.
So is that why like we don't watch the grass grow? But man, cutting it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait.
That's the payoff, the cut. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about ranked for ranked laddering with best of 3, because there are a lot of like decks that we're going to talk about that are from this tournament over the weekend that you can't ladder with effectively, because they definitely need sideboards to be competitive.
100%.
So I'm very excited. But the season 1's actually just about to start here, I think sometime this week. So
it's the month rollover, so it should be February 1st. Should be Friday.
So I will be excited to. I'm excited to see how far you D-rank when the next season starts.
They actually have that information. I didn't post a link here. I looked for it before. It's like, so I'm what is it, Platinum 4 right now in Constructed. So I'll become Silver 1.
Gotcha.
So it's like it's a whole 1+.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So I'll be Gold 1 then.
Yes. And you'll be Gold 1. I'll be Red Leader. It'll be good. So
no, excuse me, Gold 1 or Gold 4. It doesn't matter. Who cares? But
it matters. The formation's important. You got to play tight.
None of like Red Leader is the only one.
Check in with Gold Leader. God, no. I mean, so it's not too bad, which is nice too, because I was because again I haven't played too much, but it has been nice to like when I put together Mono Blue, just because like I want to get my daily rewards. I can play a lot of games really quick. And then I was like, well, I should at least get like the seasonal rewards aren't good, but they're free.
Exactly.
And then the nice thing is that like if I were to not get on for a few weeks and like I didn't like play one season, I don't get entirely crushed from the last one. So I do think that eventually their seasons are going to have to be longer. If they increase the rewards a little bit, because like even still, if you go down from like is Mythic the top?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you go down from Mythic to what? To Diamond, and then Pearl. I don't know.
What other Pokemon versions have been in Ruby,
like even
Sapphire?
if you were Mythic 1 and you went down then to
well, so once you hit Mythic, you don't get
you get into the rankings.
Right.
But okay, so if you go from Mythic back down into Platinum 1 or even like Diamond 4, right? That's a lot of games. You know what I mean? And if you do rank that way, like you've got to, if you're only going to have 30-day windows and you want people to play both formats, I think it's going to be interesting to see if that once you get into those Mythic rankings, how does that actually start affecting like your qualification for a Mythic Championship or the MPL? Once we have a better information on that, then I guess I'll reserve judgment until I see that, assuming we get that.
I assume that will not actually play a factor. I assume that any qualifications for MPL or
Mythic Championships
or anything like that will be separate tournaments still.
Well, I mean, in Arena, they're gonna have Arena tournaments. When?
I don't know, but I'm not saying like I just wouldn't expect that because you don't see that. I don't think you see that in any other digital card game.
No,
where
you don't,
Where that
but-
ladder affects placement into any sort of specialty
Magic
teams.
ones. It did
It
in
did in
paper.
Magic ones, yeah. But I don't think like that's going to that is something I think is an incentive to specifically free to play players.
That's right.
It's something to chase every month to get free stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think it actually will matter for the substantial rewards that you get
That's
from
right.
playing Magic, because again, you already you can't control that. You can't control the ladder, so like you just have a bunch of potential randos like competing for the top spot because you can't guarantee your pros are going to get that top spot every time.
Well, no, but I think they made that clear in the MPL is that they want those pros to feel pressure from the people laddering. Like they made that as part of the net. So maybe it doesn't matter for something, but they do want pros to, like, if a pro isn't number one, then they should feel anxious about that.
I think they just want pros to play Arena.
That's probably true.
I think that's just the bar none, and I think
Hashtag sponsored.
hashtag WotC sponsored.
It's really hilarious to see those hashtags and see them say nice things about Arena, and then immediately tweet something about how they're frustrated with like GPs right afterwards. It's just like, well, I don't think this is working the way you wanted it to.
But I still expect those sort of things with tangible benefits to still be separate events.
Okay.
Just for the sheer fact, because that traditionally that's how you that's just how you get the cream to rise to the top. You know, we see that with their paper events. I don't see why they would really want to break from the mold for their digital events.
Right.
But yeah, so that is kind of the where we're at with Arena, and we're gonna move on here to actually talking about some tournaments. But before we do so, I do want to give a quick shout out to Comic Town, our lovely sponsor. They're actually going to be having a Modern IQ this Saturday, February 2nd, at the store here in Columbus. Entry is going to be $35, and with a noon start time. This is a way that you can come earn your ticket to, these invitational SCG Con. And this time it'll be what? Do they do one every season? Every like winter? Is it, or is it summer?
There's two.
Okay,
there's
so the
season 1 and 2.
Yeah. So you'll be queued for the summer.
Correct.
Which is the better one, I would imagine.
Yeah, based on like where you're going.
So
Though, never mind. I was gonna make a mean joke. I'm not gonna do it. I'll move past it.
we're gonna give Roanoke a break. Okay.
Yeah. they deserve it.
Oh, sure.
I have my brother-in-law tell me, it's like, oh, that's a nice airport. I'm like, have you left the airport?
have you ventured outside?
It's like, no. Oh, like, all right.
Yeah, fair enough.
So it's a nice airport.
All right. So you got some tournaments to talk about of varying sizes. The first one we're actually going to be talking about is a Star City Games IQ that none other than our very own Mike won.
Hey, that's me.
Playing Mono Red Phoenix. This is a local tournament held by Comic Town, of course.
Morgan, you don't have to put this in the show notes. I appreciate that.
Mike makes the show notes. I want you to know that. I'm gonna let you know how the sausage is made, and Mike does the show notes.
Yeah, I at least wanted to mention it because, like, I know I posted on Twitter a little bit about it. This is the second tournament that I've won with Mono Red Phoenix in within a month's time, and I really like where it stands, and I like it even more because Ironworks is leaving. So
yeah,
I'm considering going to Toronto to keep playing the deck. That's literally where I'm at. So had a pretty good run throughout the day. I lost one game in the Swiss.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty good. Didn't really make too many changes. I think going forward though, there's if you look at if you go back and look at that, so if you look at the IQ lists, there is a couple other versions of the Mono Red list. Their versions are playing like Soulscar Mage in the main now, and they're playing Rending Volleys. And I think like now for sure, since like Ironworks is out, I could probably move away from Braids into Rending Volleys. But overall, pretty happy with it. So the actual it was almost a friend of mine and a friend of a lot of people who are associated with the cast. Ryan McCamish, he almost made it to the finals with me. So,
that's too bad. I am a big Ryan McCamish fan. We always, when I go to paper tournaments, we always would sit next to each other and be like, "Oh, hey, you're here. How's it going?" But yeah, he's good people. Also, friend of the show, Elliot Bork, is in the top four here.
I had to defeat him to get to the finals.
Oh, Elliot,
it was not great.
Your sacrifice was not made in vain.
And then local player Clay Householder is the one that we end up in the finals.
Yeah, there's a lot of fiery birds, a lot of fiery lightning birds, and then like some titans.
Yeah, I do want to point out that the person I defeated in top 8 was on Jeskai was Nick Cowden, which if you don't know his name, he definitely top 8'd the team constructed open in January in Columbus.
And just recently top 8'd last week's tournament.
Top 4 last week's tournament. We'll talk about his Esper list. So,
but yeah, he's local to the Northeast.
Yeah, he's also a Northeast guy with Nick or not Nick, with Ryan
McCamish. Yeah,
so
lots of quality players coming down from that corridor.
So it was just like, ooh, like it was a tough IQ. So you know, I was the toughest out.
Yeah, we get it. You're good at Magic.
Good.
I understand. I really like the Mono Red Phoenix deck because I've looked at it. I've like thought about they need to reprint Manamorphose like so bad, like 100% so bad, because realistically this deck isn't that expensive. It's still one of the cheaper decks within Modern, which is quite surprising.
It's the mana base that saves you so much. Like, you gotta
a lot of mountains.
You got to get Phoenixes, you got to get Manamorphoses, and you have to get Blood Moons. Beyond that, like
Blood Moons aren't that bad at this point in time. They've been reprinted so many times recently. Phoenixes are expensive, but they are also in a set that continues to get printed right now.
And also, like the deck in Standard that was playing Phoenix just isn't anymore.
Yeah.
So like they're standing to go down. And the nice thing too, you mentioned Blood Moon. Like Blood Moon's still $20 to $30, but it's still $20 to $30 despite all those printings. So it's not too expensive, but also like
prevalent.
Like you are safe. Like if you just go buy that card, you're safe.
Yeah.
You know, I used to worry about that because man, these are like $30, $40. I don't want to do this, and I finally bought into them. Like I got mine at the M Mono Masters 3 printing is the ones I have.
Yeah.
And they've been reprinted at least once, right? The M25 after that. Didn't matter. Like
right.
You know, they're not like super expensive, but like you don't get dinged. So yeah, no, I think like for the price it's definitely worth having. You end up with a bunch of just like random staples too. Like if you have the deck, you end up with Monastery Swift Spears, all your burn spells, you have like Faithless Lootings, you just have a lot of things you can use for other decks. Which is nice.
And the deck's clearly powerful. I think does it show up in the Modern Classic as well, or I know Phoenix decks do.
No, there was only Izzet. So
okay.
Yeah, Mono Red Phoenix has really taken a bit of a downturn, which I think is sort of interesting. If I was going to play a burn deck, this is the burn deck I would play.
It is fun because there are some pretty interesting burn takes on burn that we're going to talk about in the Classic that I'm pretty excited about. So. Yeah,
and if you already have burn or you already have this deck, then you're already like 1 foot in.
Right, exactly. Like I already have still a majority of burn, and I actually have a lot more burn because I'm borrowing Mike's burn cards.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I need those back someday.
Yeah, I know, I understand. But you've been playing this deck, so who cares?
It's true. I was going to play the sweetest mountains ever. Anyways,
so let's talk about GP New Jersey, which apparently, WotC didn't even want to go to realistically, but. It was taken down by Max Williams, which you may or may not know at this point in time. It was a limited tournament. It did sell out, which I think is a big deal.
No, it certainly is. They didn't have a feature match area, but one of the reasons they didn't have a feature match area, not only because there wasn't coverage, which we'll talk about, but it was because they deconstructed it to fit more tables.
Yes.
So not just for the sellout of the GP, but like for all the side events of the Magic Fest. Like there was a judge who posted about how like there was like a modern event happening in 3 different places at once because they just had to find seating for it. So from that perspective, definitely a success.
Yes. And there was some controversy that kind of surrounded this tournament, and we don't have an official word from anyone at this point in time. We know that the only thing official that we have is that text coverage is not going to be updated every round. So they typically would do like standings. And post them on the actual coverage page so people could follow along if you weren't at the tournament and wanted to follow a particular set, player or players. But they are going forward not going to do that. People have since then, with bits and pieces of information from other sources, have extrapolated that this could potentially mean that GP coverage as a whole is not going to be a thing that continues at all or in any sort of prominence going forward. I think the most recent update is that the photographer, one of the well-known photographers that they usually hire for not only GPs but of course the Mythic Champions or the Pro Tours, has been let go of. I guess, or not pursuing contracts with, because I'm sure all those people are contracted. So. There is a lot that's going on, and people are digging into it. And WotC's continued silence on the subject is not making things any better.
No.
And they should just say something. And I don't know if they're not saying things because they have to now change their plans, potentially. But hopefully by the end of this month, we do get the organized play announcements, and we get some more information. Because either way, even if it's bad news, even if it's going to make people upset, they need to tell people. Because they need to set where they want to go with the future of Magic Fests. And I believe that the overall importance of the Magic Fest or the GP is going to be, over the next few years, gradually decreased to very lightly focused on the actual competitive event, and going to be more focused on a convention atmosphere, which could mean that there's going to be less of them, but they might be in bigger spaces, and that the rewards for the events are probably going to be less focused on queuing for a bigger tournament. That would be my assumption, because I really feel like they're making strides to, with the things that happened with this tournament, de-emphasize the Grand Prix.
I think that's an interesting take on it. I don't really want to go into too much conjecture just because we don't have much.
Right.
At this point, I think that's giving too much credit to WotC.
Probably.
I think the thing people were very, and I agree. Like it's weird to just go from having coverage one week and then now you're into just all of a sudden maybe not, right? I think that's weird. It's awkward. Like this is where it gets even stranger. It's awkward for WotC when it happens on a weekend where people are confused by it, and then when you look at I wouldn't call it competition, but Star City, they hit 20K plus in their stream this week for New Standard, and then WotC is like, we may not need to cover anymore. And I'm like, okay, it's weird that you people were using like their own language against them, the language in the arena ad. It's like you will be known, all these things, and it's like, well, of course, it actually won't be in any way, shape, or in a way possible. We've already talked about how they've rushed all these decisions. They rushed into arena. And they got a little bit lucky with how popular Arena has been. They rushed into this MPL stuff. The MPL players have been openly complaining about they don't know what's going on, right? We're about to hit our second to last, or our last wave of RPTQs, and that's it. There's currently no qualification system whatsoever unless you go to a Magic Fest, which has Mythic Championship qualifiers. So I think like you're suggesting, like maybe they're moving that way, maybe. But I think it's giving WotC too much credit. They said they would have an announcement about organized play by the end of the month. You mentioned like maybe we'll get something by the end of the month. It's important to note that this podcast might not go up by the end of this month, just based on Morgan's recent track record. Yeah, shots fired.
It's all right. Fridays have been fine.
Because Friday is February 1st. Like that's just where we're at right now.
Exactly.
So I think that's and like. So then what? On Thursday, we're just going to get a massive dump, and then they're going to say, and I mean that in every sense of the word. And then they're just going to say, well, this is why. What company does that? I got to tell you, if you Magic is the best product. Blizzard isn't doing that. Eternal's not doing that. You know what I mean? Like, that's weird for you to just be like, oh, it's okay for us to do this. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's hilarious when you see like the people frustrated about these things. You see the guy who won, Max Williams, who won this GP. His actual top 8 picture is him literally shushing the camera, and they posted that. He's like, I secretly won a GP because no one's here, and they were like, yeah, that's fine. Don't take a different picture. Whatever. Here's your trophy that's not for this GP to take a picture of. Please give that back to us. Right? 2 documentaries about the Fire Festival now exist on Netflix and Hulu. This is the wrong time to be doing this weird kind of garbage. So, if they're not doing as much coverage, that's fine. But the crazy thing is that it seems to be news to everybody, right? It's going to be news when you announce it. It is. Mm-hmm. But based on tweets we got over the weekend, it seems to be news to coverage teams. Like, we had a really weird tweet from Rich Hagon who was like, yeah, we essentially work when we're told. And it's like, why are you tweeting that out? That seems like some weird, like, vague booking, subtweeting sort of like, it's...
I assume it's so people know that they are not like, they're contractual employees of Wizards. They're not like actual employees of Wizards.
Like, if you just stay ahead of this, you never have this problem. if it, we discussed a bunch in our our Discord for the podcast, like what this looks like, and Morgan, you, to your credit, but you were very even keel about this, and I would agree that, like, I would agree with your answer of, like, WotC's a corporation, Hasbro's a corporation, this and that. If they acted like a corporation, corporations, like, they mess up sometimes with their branding. They got to apologize for that stuff. They don't just not announce things. New flavors of Coke don't show up in the store, and then Coke's like, oh, so we got raspberry cherry Diet Coke now. We totally forgot about that. Or, like, Coke itself doesn't just disappear, and they're like, oh yeah, we're actually rolling back the branding on that. We just figured you'd figure it out when it stopped existing. Like, that doesn't happen.
I agree.
So I just, calling them, like, giving it the cold corporation look, I think it's when does it just become inept?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, having having this podcast and covering a lot of things that Wizards of the Coast has done, I think we are well into the idea that people running certain sectors of Wizards of the Coast are 100% inept.
Yeah.
I think that we've gone past that point. So you either, as a consumer of their products, have to accept the ineptitude and figure out a way to come to terms with that in your soul. It's just hard for me to expect more from them.
So that's still where I disagree with you, because
it just is, though.
But I disagree with you because, like you said, one of the reasons that WotC may not have made an announcement now is because now they're rethinking it, and WotC does have a track record of listening to the community, which a lot of other companies would not do. And while I think the overlords, the Hasbro corporate overlords, former guest of the show, friend of the show, Brian Keller, even said that if you play this game long enough, you know that Wizards of the Coast didn't always act like this. Hasbro has influenced this. They have a new CEO that's influencing this. So it's frustrating because, like, leadership has both been fairly bold recently, while also maintaining the ineptitude. But individual employees there, the people that are the heart and soul and make this game, love it. And, like,
I agree with that.
And you can tell in the way that they communicate with people, they get frustrated by these. I mean, Aaron Forsyth, that guy, like, you can tell that he's got his hands tied sometimes, but he's like, just please bear with us. I know, and like, Rosewater is a constant source of optimism and he's had to really go and be the face of a lot of things. Helene Bergeau died for Hasbro's sins. You know what I mean? Like, did you see, I made mention of one on her back. I saw that, Saffron Olive, like, tagged her in a tweet. It was like, if I became the randomly the CEO of WotC, the first thing I do is bring Helene Bergeau back. And she was like, you're very kind, but no. He was like, well, I don't see it happening, so you're good. But she was just like you're missing that face, you're missing these things, so you keep making these decisions. And, like, yeah, I guess you can do that because you're right, Morgan, they make the best game in the world. Like, there's plenty of people who have called us out for being really critical of WotC in the past, but here we are still talking about the game.
100%.
Like, I get that I'm a walking pile of hypocrisy. I understand, but I got to play this game, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And Hasbro, unfortunately, it seems like, is pushing it further and further where they know that, but it's tough because we talk about knowing WotC before Hasbro. WotC only gets to Hasbro because of the passion of the player base. The changes that have shaped here, like, WotC has invited the Magic community to take a lot of ownership in the game and has in turn rewarded that. When you look at, like, some of the things that have made Magic profitable and maintained profitability even during, like, poor constructed eras, like, you're talking about Cube, you're talking about Commander, which is a huge cash cow now for WotC. They didn't create that. The players did. You know what I mean? So before it always felt like they would listen specifically because of the collaborative element to it. Maybe they don't anymore. Maybe they're not going to anymore. Maybe arena's big enough they don't have to. But that, for me, that's a little bit heartbreaking if that's true.
So here's an interesting thing that I think about a lot when we talk about decisions that WotC makes and who is hurt by them. And I really wish I knew someone that was invested in this game deeply, who was a non-competitive player. I truly do. That's because fair. I need to pick their brain. I need to see, do they watch coverage? Do they care about GPs? Do they care about any competitive aspects of the game? Or do they just care about the game and how they choose to play it and buying sealed product from WotC or from their LGS or whatever they get that, and that is where WotC sees their benefit, or WotC / Hasbro sees where they're making money. So if that's the case, then you don't care about the competitive player. But how do you convert the competitive player into someone who generates revenue for WotC? Because you're never going to do it by like you're secondary. You have a secondary market. Competitive players buy singles; they don't buy sealed product. How do you get them to buy sealed product? Arena is how you get them to buy sealed product, and I think that is where this is being navigated to, potentially. But I feel like really strongly if this is how you convert money from competitive players directly into WotC's coffers or Hasbro's coffers. But that's why I want to know how much of an influence coverage has on the casual player. Because if it's 0, then of course WotC doesn't care about it. Or they find a cheaper way to do it.
But again, like that sounds like cogent to me and makes sense.
Again, not something that WotC would necessarily be able to
Except for
pull
then,
off.
why is there a $1 million tournament in March? Because there in no way whatsoever is going to appeal to that casual person you're talking about. Because if they don't watch coverage and they don't read the mothership and they don't do other things, right? You know, I could put you in a contact with some of those people. Not really, because they're through my job. But
Sure.
I know the people that live in a rural area who don't sleeve their cards, who just buy what they get at Target and just enjoy the game. They don't know any of the other stuff, right? So sure, WotC's getting their money, the big box store's getting their money, right? Why in the world would you quadruple the amount of money you're pouring into competitive? If that's actually the case, then they do not know what they're doing, which I would hope is my argument for I don't think that's the case.
So
Is that just to look good on a national stage?
100%.
But what does that gain you if that's not where your money comes from?
Because people read articles. $1 million catches a lot of eyes, right?
Of course it does, but
So-
not the person you're talking about.
But if it focus is still on Arena, then it is.
Maybe I don't
Because
know.
people
Those
saw-
people I'm talking about don't play Arena and they don't know what it is.
Yet. They don't know what it is yet. Because there's nothing on Arena that interests them, but eventually there will be.
Yeah, but if that were the case, then Arena would be on your phone now, and that would be their priority.
That is more.
Arena would be on your iPad, and that'd be a priority.
That is still a development timeline issue. That is
No,
they
they have flat out said that is no longer a goal. Mobile is not a goal of Arena,
I think nothing is ruled out with Arena.
but it's not a goal, and it has to be technologically if you're going to talk to those people.
What I would want to do at that point in time is research where Hearthstone initially started and said what their goals were, because I'm sure their goals were get out of beta, then get to get on Mac if it wasn't already on there. Then because as a software you can have when you're developing software you can have large goals and small goals. So what do they mean by goal? What do they see by the future? I think they might be being cagey and saying like, oh, that's not that's not because they don't want people to expect it around the corner. I don't think mobile is around the corner. I hope
course not.
I hope that something like Mac platform is around the corner. I hope that honestly around the corner. That's the only thing I would expect from that, because software development takes time, and it's not just as easy as like this screen works on this screen works on this screen. You have to make
No, I know it's not
know.
magic. Okay. That's a poor phrasing. I suppose it is magic, but no, I'm well aware like the coding hassles on it, and like this is the first time we're dealing with a company that can even like design a game. To be quite honest,
Yeah.
But what I mean by that, like you're discussing these things though, like add those things together. And it's still not a vision that makes any actual sense. And here's what I will tell you. Those people I'm talking about, now this is anecdotal because I literally have individuals in mind here that I could tell you that are these people you're talking about. Do you know what they still do?
what do they still do?
They still play Duel of the Planeswalkers on the phone. That
Makes
happened
sense.
at my job
That tracks.
in the last week.
That 100% tracks.
So you can't tell me like if you're trying to get that person, because that casual person will get it through their Xbox, will get it through their phone, and they do. So if that's actually the goal, like you're going to get your eyes on it, they've got to be able to take it with them, because that's how they know Hearthstone. That's how they know Eternal.
100%. I fully believe, regardless of what they say, that has to be something that they have to have in the pipeline, even if it's a while from now. Because Hearthstone wasn't instantaneously on mobile.
Of course
either.
not. No.
So it was on mobile well after it hit 1.0, and Magic is not at 1.0 yet.
Sure.
Arena's not at 1.0 yet. So we're still a fair ways off from that.
You're not wrong, but I think like you have to assess how something enters the market when something else has existed for so long.
I agree.
I think like you could say Hearthstone didn't do this, but I think there should be an expectation that the Magic does it faster.
I think that is an expectation that is not wrong to have, but is something that's going to leave you.
It's certainly wrong to have.
I think it's just like if you have that expectation, you're going to be left disappointed because Wizards of the Coast has a track record of not putting the best people in place to fast track their software. Now maybe that's changed because Arena is sort of taken on a stronger prevalence. People do like Arena a heck of a lot, and not just the pros that have a voice on Twitter, but like everyone likes. We've seen times Arena has overtaken Hearthstone in viewership. Now maybe those are times when they're getting like front page space or what have you.
I still think that doesn't matter though. I agree. Like, it still happens.
So like it's a good product, and maybe now that they can start looking at the future a little bit clearer. I think they just want to get out of 1.0.
Yeah.
I think like there's so many other things that they have to answer. Getting on other platforms isn't their priority, and I fully believe that. I fully believe making a functional program that we can have competitive Magic on is definitely a priority.
And hopefully it's again the conjecture here I don't think does us any good. I think that even if those are WotC's long-term goals, they have done things out of order as usual. They have rushed something they probably shouldn't have rushed to try and catch lightning in a bottle. They got lucky to catch lightning in a bottle, and now they don't know what to do with it. If you look at everything from this weekend, there are so many things that don't make sense, right? Like you, in the same breath, you were suggesting that like GPs are not as important, while the GP that took place this weekend struggled to find space to contain all the players, right? And the main event sells out. You look at Star City. Star City had their largest open in history in Columbus 4 weeks ago. They hit 20K plus viewers this weekend after they've made strong changes once again into their. Do you know how much Star City coverage I watched this weekend? It was amazing. They kept swapping out announcers, commentators. They were always fresh, and they had so many matches. The backup matches were beautiful. Like there was so much Magic this weekend, and you know what happened? Viewers responded. You had a new standard format and amazing coverage, and you hit a huge number for an open in January. You know what I mean? I think like, so if you're going to tell me that, well, we need to devalue GPs and there's not enough money to be made in streaming, but then you look at what happened this weekend, you look at WotC and go, okay, maybe that's true in the future, but you are missing something. Or maybe you're not, but then you've got to communicate better. You just have a tale of two companies. You have it looks like two different ideologies constantly pushing against each other. If they ever manage to unify it, and for once ever not have multiple announcements, they just come out and say, this is it, this is it, this is this, it'll be beautiful. And I think that's what we would all hope to see. But unfortunately, WotC doesn't do that. So I don't want to have any conjecture on what they're doing. They messed up this weekend, regardless of what their intention is, because the communication should always be better. In this day and age where you can communicate with individual fans of your game at any moment, at any time, there is no excuse for the pathetic level of communication that happened. And regardless of what their plan is, they messed up.
I agree. So. I don't disagree with that fact. I think that we are currently in a very, very weird, very awkward middle school era of Magic right now.
It's got a lot of acne over at WotC, and they want to ask players to dance, but like
they're so nervous and like, what do I do with my hands? What do my hands do?
It's mostly touch your genitals.
WotC don't do that, but I think that's where we are right now, and it's going to be very, very frustrating for a lot of different types of players.
Yeah, I agree.
So. But that was GP New Jersey.
Hey, so here's the thing. We hate this company. Let's talk about this game we love so much.
We love certain aspects of Wizards of the Coast, and I think like that's definitely fine. And you make a good point with like some employees are truly, and I think like you're going to find that obviously with the people that we feel most connected with the designers. You know, we don't know the people pushing papers around.
We don't know the corporate people. You're right.
We don't. We know the faces of the game, which are the play design team and the actual design team. and R&D. Like that's who we know,
But-
so that's who we feel most connected with.
But I think like there's a reason for that too. Now we are lucky enough to know some of them personally.
It's true.
And have had conversations with them. Like that is a window not everyone gets. But you and I think, have done a good job of taking advantage of opportunities they've presented. How many different people have we talked to at cons in the last few years that we've had personal conversations with people from WotC?
That's true.
You know what I mean? When I say that again, that community piece, that ownership that WotC had that other companies don't, like there was transparency there. This is like, during the birthday celebration, I got to interview people about the Transformers game. I got to talk to a number of people who were representatives from WotC that weekend. We talked to Helene before. We've talked to Aaron Forsyth before. We said we had Stott on this podcast.
Yeah.
I think like when you look at that stuff, I've had conversations with Melissa DeToro before. She's really nice to talk to. Like that is
Mike's over here name dropping people.
Well, okay, I'm not trying to do that. I really
I know,
not. Okay,
I'm just asking you.
I mean Dan Musser. I went to high school with the guy. But I've been to his home and played Guitar Hero with him. Okay, what I'm saying here though is that most people could do that. You could get on Twitter. Like Mark Rosewater did his mailbag segment this weekend, and that guy, beyond his article, goes out of his way to answer a ton more questions. You know what I mean? Like that. I think like when you have those people who share that passion, they have been so good about celebrating cosplayers and like focusing on the lore. What they did for Dominaria was amazing. Like they have done so many of these things, and that feels so at odds with, we're not doing text coverage anymore. Please await next transmission. Like that. That is where I guess that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. But yeah,
do you want to hear who else I've met?
No, not interested. And I'm sure
Good, because I'm like out of people.
Oh, good. I'm glad we reached the bottom.
I did drink with Brian Kilber before that.
Yeah, I know. We have many an interesting story to tell about that, but that'll never happen. So let's talk about Indy.
Indeed,
it was again, one of the return of the standard open. Couldn't find the words there for a second.
Yeah, I get it.
The standard open, which we haven't seen a true standard open in over a year, right?
I can't tell you how much it hurt to watch on coverage not go.
Yeah, I know. Like week one standard is like your bread and butter.
I just like these last 2 weeks in January, everybody in my wife's and mine's family has a birthday. Like my mom, my grandmother, her mom, her sister, like it's a ton of people. And then my wife may have given herself a slight concussion the Thursday. So even if I could have found a way to go, like I wouldn't have gone because there was just no way for me to go because Indy's very close.
Yeah.
But yeah, having to sit there and watch, like it's been so long since I've been like, ooh, I want to try this deck. Ooh, I want to try this deck. Oh, I want to do this. It was fun to watch, but I'm not gonna lie, it hurt. It hurt to not be there.
I bet.
I do love it. Like that is just an element I like being in. So, which is again like even though it's modern, which is like why I'm like I don't know. Let's go to Toronto. Let's go play a Magic tournament. I gotta go like do something. Ugh, I hate you, WotC.
I'm sorry. But let's talk about the deck list. Let's talk about what we saw. The first thing we want to give a hearty congratulations to is Anthony DeVardi for winning the tournament with Sultai midrange, defeating Jonathan Hobbs playing Bant midrange. And midrange was kind of the story of the weekend. I think a lot of Sultai midrange, which is the green black Golgari list splashing for primarily Hydra
Crassus.
Yes, and this was I don't remember what we rated. The Crassus on our review. I imagine that we were high on it.
Yeah,
if we weren't, then I apologize.
I know that I read it incorrectly, and I talked about that on the cast before because I thought you also got half X counters too, and I was like, no, this card. I think like when you look at these lists, this is a pretty natural place for it. The Golgari decks were already super value driven, but we're struggling to figure out what their top end was. Sometimes it was Carnage Tyrant, sometimes it was Planeswalkers. But what could really get you over the top? Because these decks need some sort of card advantage engine. When you look at like comparing it to even like Jund and Modern, right? Like you need your Liliana of the Veil to keep resources even. You need your Bloodbraid Elf to get a little bit of value. How are you going to get your value?
Yeah,
right?
You need your Dark Confidants.
Right, exactly. Like how are you going to get that value? Your K command, whatever it be. Well, this deck is full of nothing but 2-for-1s. You look at Explorer, you're just like every time you hit a land card, you're just like digging through your deck. and then you get to Hydra Crassus, which is when you look at it, is the perfect cherry on top of that deck. You know, your explore creatures, make sure you hit your land drops, and maybe you have extra lands, and it scales. So if you get stuck at some point, you can cast the first one. Most of these went up to playing a lot more copies of Find Finality than maybe they were before.
Yeah, just being able to rebuy them is
because you can just play the first one and just draw a card, and just chump something with it, and now it just sits in your graveyard waiting. Like that watching that on camera multiple times, where like the Crassus is for 2 or 3, would then chain into the next one for 4 or 5, and then what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? And people were packing a lot of Disdainful Strokes. I can't even tell you. I at least 4 or 5 times that I saw specifically on coverage throughout the weekend where somebody had mana up for Disdainful Stroke, and the opponent just cast a large Hydra Crassus, and you're like, cool, counter it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll just draw the cards.
Like I'm gonna be up 4 cards. I'm gonna be up 3 cards. Like it was crazy to see that, and I think the deck. When I say the deck and the card can certainly be fought against, but if you look at the day 2 metagame, like Sultai did well, and it winning the tournament was not surprising.
No. I think that makes sense, and adding another color to Golgari was going to make the most sense once we got allegiances.
Yeah, it's fairly trivial. I mean, like 3-color mana bases are easy, and we saw that a lot this weekend. Our top 2 lists are 3-color mana bases.
Correct, and we also have Esper control and Esper midrange there in the top 8. Kind of rounding out the other tricolor mana bases that we have in the top 8 represented.
And you should see the cards they're trying to cast. If you look at the second place list, Bant Midrange, Jonathan Hobbs, man after my own heart, that's 4 copies of Frilled Mystic and 4 copies of Angel of Grace. That's blue, green, white, all flash, right?
Very true.
You had the Esper control players playing multiple copies of Kaya's Wrath. You had
and absorb.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you had even the Esper deck that White Darby played. You're playing was it Bellhaunt, Midnight Bellhaunt? Is that what
Basilica Bellhaunt?
Basilica Bellhaunt. That's it. With your white, black in your deck that also wants to cast multiple blue spells. So
no double blue though. He was a bit more reserved. He talking about the deck. He's like I avoided double blue.
But I think like when you look at those, it tells you that whenever you have this kind of mana, you can push these cards. And it's crazy. Heck, I mean, like again, this Bant deck is crazy. Like it plays like a weird flash deck when you have access to also like March of the Multitudes, Depose, Deploy, Warrant Warden.
Yeah, like this says Bant midrange, but you could really sell this on being a Bant flash sort of strategy, just because of so many things you can do at instant speed.
Right. So I think those 2 decks really tell you how the format can go. Some old decks from the format were still good. You want to look at Exorius Aggro, Max Magnuson?
Yeah, so Max Magnuson and Andrew Ellenbogen both played Azorius Aggro. Ellenbogen, a recent Pro Tour winner. So they're the only 2 people that played this. They both day 2'd, I believe. And Max, obviously, receiving 3rd place here. So this, for the most part, is a mono white deck. The blue splash comes in with Deputy of Detention as being a new card added to this deck. And honestly, with the prevalence of Crassus, it kind of makes sense. I think a lot of people were maybe a little bit down on this card. It's a 1/3. It's a body. I mean, Detention Sphere is a great card, but it being a creature over an enchantment is just an inherent downside.
Yeah, so I know we talked about this on the cast a little bit, but on the Palooza a little bit. But I think what's interesting too, there was I don't know if it was Elsphere or not, but somebody had a good write up about this card where, so like these kind of creatures have always been playable. Like Fiend Hunter saw a ton of play.
Yeah.
But people compared it to Fairgrounds Warden, right? But Fairgrounds Warden wasn't standard with vehicles. So inherently, Fairgrounds Warden was going to be a lot worse because it couldn't hit Smuggler's Copter, it couldn't hit Heart of Kiran, it couldn't hit Sky Sovereign. So if you can't hit those things, then like you half your opponent's creatures aren't creatures on the turn. How are you going to do anything?
Right.
So I think that maybe made people forget a little bit about how good this was, because this is not the only list too. Again, White Darby is also packing, I think, 3 or 4 copies of Deputy Detention. So the card's very good. Again, a lot of random tokens running around.
Yeah, clear tokens out and chef's kiss.
Yeah, and I think like against like even especially a lot of decks are running white aggro. Decks that are running things like again History Benalia, like this card feels pretty good. So I'm not surprised to see the play. That I think some people, like you said, were maybe surprised to see it do that. I was sad when I first saw both of these. Because I know Ellenbug was on coverage. I was like, oh man, Azorius aggro. Show me Dovin.
Nope, but if you look at Wyatt Darby list.
Oh, I'm building this deck.
Okay. I already have it on Arena.
Nice.
So
I think I'm going to try and play it at FNM Friday. So.
It's very, very fun. He streams, so you should check out some of his streams if you can.
Yeah.
Because he talks about the deck. He just had an article that came out on Star City Games Premium that has a sideboard guide.
Yeah, so I read that today, actually.
But he did make a couple of changes from this list, but because just for the sheer fact that, as we can kind of see, I guess the other story is red is not really a issue. Not really something that rose to the top. It was prevalent on day 2, but we don't have any in the top 8. The only deck playing red, I should say, is Izzet Drakes, played by
Brad Carpenter.
Brad Carpenter, who has been playing Izzet Drakes.
And I think red did take 10th place. Caleb Shearer was in 10th place.
Yeah, so that's the highest place, but we don't see a crack top 8. And with that. He decided to cut a Basilica Bellhaunt for the other Thief of Sanity, and having played a little bit with that deck, Thief of Sanity. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that card. Knew that card was.
Yeah, exactly. If you played that card in limited, it always felt great, and being able to actually have a constructed deck play it, because there's just something that makes you feel like the most. White W said this on his stream last night. He's like, "There's nothing that makes you feel better as looking at the top 3 cards, seeing 3 insane cards for your opponent's deck, bidding 2 of them, and then your opponent going, "What did you pick?"
Yeah, I don't understand. I think he even said this deck was just fun. That's he couldn't put it down.
I will agree with that. The deck is a lot of fun.
And this we talked about Hero Precinct 1 being a card that it would just need to find a home, and he built a home for it. And this is that Dovin deck where he even said I don't know how many of them you could play. It's kind of a liability against the red decks, but he did say in his article, I think today, that if you turn 2 Hero Precinct 1 into turn 3 Dovin is probably the best start against most of the decks in the format, which is probably true.
Yes.
Because you literally threaten lethal real quick. Well, ultimate, I should say, not lethal, but
yeah.
Oh my gosh! So I like a lot of this deck. Basilica Bellhaunt is a card I think we overlooked. But when you look at it as a 3/4 for 4 that is immediately a 2 for 1 and possibly a 3 for 1, when they're burn heavy and you're gaining 3 life, and it stonewalls all their creatures outside of Lava Coil kills it. Otherwise, what's getting through. So if you make them discard a card and then they have to attack into you and then use another spell on this card, it's just disgusting. So. Between this and Wild Growth Walker, I think it does a lot of explanation as to why some of the red decks did not do so great. Because Wild Growth Walker was literally Tarmogoyf all weekend.
Yeah, I think people were just prepared. People knew to be prepared for the red deck, and it showed. I love this deck just for the sheer fact that you get to play Thought Erasure, and this deck is such a good Thought Erasure deck. It's amazing because I think this deck has a lot of good choices that you can make, which I know a lot of people really, really like, having a good mid-range deck that gives you a lot of choices in every turn. Whether you play your Thought Erasure on turn 2 or you lead with a Hero Precinct 1 or something like that. This deck may not look like much on paper, but it is so much fun to play.
Yeah, I think if you go back and watch the top 8 and watch his match against Nick Cowden, he does lose that match, but he manages to take game 1 in a deck where he essentially has 8-ish dead cards game 1 against that, and because of Thought Erasure and good sequencing, the deck just had so much play that he was able to power through.
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting. So. Speaking of Esper Control, we should probably talk about Nick Cowden's deck.
For sure.
He's not the only one. I guess it's Nick and Andrew Davis.
So Nick Cowden did finish 4th in the tournament with Esper Control. And I think that this is a fairly what you would expect from Esper Control. We even have the Chromium showing up as the card that ends the game eventually. But everything else kind of looks fairly fairly average. Very similar to things that we've seen from Shaheen Sarani and other players who really enjoy these kind of control strategies. I've played a little bit with Esper Control on Arena in the best of 1 format, which obviously isn't where it shines necessarily. Sometimes you just can gain control of the game and it's lights out for a lot of different kind of decks. One thing he's playing 3 Precognitive Perception and 1 Chemist's Insight, and I just wonder Sometimes when I was playing the deck, sometimes I just wanted something to do on. Sometimes I just want to draw cards in turn 4 or something like that. So I wonder how that shook out for him. But prerogative, the draw spell is is powerful, and he showed that multiple times. It's just being able to like play it on his main phase and get that scry 3 draw 3, which is oof.
It looked like that card helped force like the concession in games 2 and 3, even against Darby in the top 8, because it was just like it's like now you just have so many resources. But I do think like we should definitely talk about Absorb, which is a card like we knew had a chance to be really played. But again, when you're looking at the beating down red, when you're countering their turn 3 play and then negating one of their spells,
one of their lightning bolts,
one of their attacks. You gain so much time. Like if you're countering like Goblin Chain Whirler with this, and then like sure, attack me with your Viational Pyromancer. You're just like, like there. I think who was it? Caleb Shearer I saw playing against this deck. Whoever it was in day 2, like who got absorbed twice in the first few turns, like turns 3 and 4, and it was just like, how does the red deck ever win here?
Yeah, I have to say like that. Those are the lines. Those are the cards that allow you to turn the corner early against red. Is like having a couple of absorbs and like maybe throwing in a removal spell like a cast down or a moment of craving, and like those allow you to turn the corner in best of 1. So
it's
game
just,
1s in this example.
It just seems rough because like now more so than ever, it looks like the red decks are gonna have to lean on their enchantments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's tough because like not. And also, all these Esper decks are playing Mortify.
For sure. I think one thing that is a good takeaway from this list, though, is the Force Syncopate. Because a lot of people were not playing that card or skimping on it. And I think knowing what the format looks like now, where we have people like tapping out all the way for Hydroid Crassus.
Oh, yeah.
And like against the Sultai decks, being able to just counter it for 2 and it being gone forever is so important.
Yeah. All the like Syncopate's great against mid range because those are curve out decks. So you just want to curve out. So like absolutely.
And if the format continues to be that way, and even like against red, it still gives you an interaction point on the second turn if they tap out.
Turns 2 and 3 when you critically need it. So were there any other major differences for Andrew Davis's list? There's the Chromium. There's 4 Absorb. He had a Notions Reign, so maybe that's the card you want.
So that is one thing that like in Shaheen's list that he was playing a 1 of Notion Rain. I don't know if I can get behind that.
Yeah.
I'd rather honestly play another Chemist's Insight. Just the 2 life is too much of a liability.
It just feels weird to be playing like a deck that really wants Absorb, then also wants to tap out on sometimes on 3.
Yeah.
That does seem awkward. And I will say like these decks like are very good, but their mana is not perfect. Cowden definitely lost a game on camera like where he mulled and his 4th land was a basic island, and he couldn't Kaya's Wrath, and he died. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there has been some discussion of whether in these lists if you should be playing a basic island or a Dimir Guildgate.
Oh, interesting.
Just for the sheer fact that usually it's a 1 of island, and it hurts you so bad for things like Kaya's Wrath.
Andrew Davis doesn't have it.
Correct. He's playing 2 plains and 2 swamps to kind of counterbalance that. I think like that could be a way that you take the mana base. I really would like to try to play Cowden's list with replacing the island with a Guildgate and see how much that actually negatively affects you, and just try that experiment. But I think Davis's list is a little bit different. We do see different numbers. We see like 3 Moment of Cravings, and actually, I don't think Cowden's list had main deck negates.
No, it did not,
because it had the Syncopates.
The Syncopates, yeah.
And that's tough. I still think
main deck negate's not where I want to be.
I still think I'd lean towards Cowden's Syncopates because I think knowing that you're going to be playing against Sultai mid range, and I feel like Syncopate is still pretty decent against those decks for a lot of time, and even can theoretically get better late game just for the sheer fact of them tapping out for Crassuses.
Right.
I think that this list is definitely less modified from the lists that were going around before this tournament, but I think Cowden's was tuned. It felt like it was a little bit more tuned to what the metagame was, what he was expecting from the metagame. And I think he just made the right calls.
Yeah, I know those guys test too, so he definitely was ready for it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, is it Drake's real quick?
I know you do.
Yeah, I really do. I think it's really interesting that Niv Mizzet was almost a no-show this weekend.
Yeah.
Like, king of the format and I think it's interesting. We talk about the mana base is getting better, but it also means that you have more options for what your decks can do. And I think, like, when you saw, like, look what the control decks did, right? Like, Esper looked to be pretty much better than Jeskai this weekend. So not to say it couldn't bounce back, but I think it's interesting to see where the format goes. Even like the decks having access to something like Mortify makes Niv Mizzet a little more awkward. Just more decks having access to that. So, but this deck was pretty interesting. This is the 8 Drakes deck, now 12 Drakes, because they added 4 copies of Terramander.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, Terramander looked incredible.
It looked
multiple times.
Brad Carpenter, I watched a couple of his games, and like Terramander just like was lights out for a lot of people, because the commentators kept saying that Terramander makes your Charter Courses so much better.
Oh yeah, like you just get to draw 2 because you're not playing Phoenix anymore, so you get to draw 2 on 2 a lot more often.
Yes.
And I think like the way it plays with your Drakes is so interesting because like you're incentivized to play it on 1 as a 1/1.
Yeah.
But it's going to have to eat a removal spell at some point. So if it does eat a removal spell early, well then fine. Then when there's a higher chance your Enigma Drake lives on turn 3. But late game, your Terramanders are just 2 mana 5/5s. Like that's just what there's 2 mana 5/5s. Like, it is
flying
crazy.
5/5s.
Yeah, like I mean they're Tombstalkers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's it. So I think like we saw that be pretty impressive multiple times. Now he at one point was 10-0 in the tournament, and then he lost 3, and then he battled back for top 8. But I think like there's nothing crazy else here new. You're playing Opt Shock, Charter Course, Lava Coil, Discovery Dispersal. Sideboard, I think if I had to take a guess, his sideboard probably, if you look at it, it's pretty much an old standard sideboard, and I think that may have hurt him this weekend.
Potentially.
Even things like Niv Mizzet, when you look at like some of the control matchups you would have played, like the Esper decks, I don't think Niv Mizzet's where I would have wanted to be. So I think maybe like Rao wasn't bad, but I don't know. So I think it'll be interesting to see where we go forward, but definitely that Terramander, Enigma Drake, Crackling Drake, and Spells shell is strong enough to still just steal games.
He is playing 2 Entrancing Melee. I can see that number either staying as being like a permanent fixture or going up. Entrancing Melee seems pretty good against Krasis.
Yeah, it does.
Especially when you can like Melody, steal it, and then hold up protection when they try to like kill it. Yeah. Seems all right.
So, yeah, it was. I agree. It's pretty sweet. So, we had another Sultai mid-range list rounding out top 8. Sorry, Abe Corrigan.
Recent, he was part of the team that won the Columbus Open.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So,
I
will say this. He was packing a card that I know you will love in the sideboard, and a card that I think is going to get more popular.
Oh, is he packing the ooze?
He's got the ooze.
Oh boy. Okay, so. Definitely do not sleep on Biogenic Ooze. I don't think many people are necessarily. It's currently like a $12 card, but this is the mid-range mirror breaker. This is how you get bigger against the mid-range mirrors, and it's something I think is definitely going to be a staple going forward. If not main deck, definitely in the sideboard, because you need a way to get bigger than what your opponent's doing, and this is one way you do it.
We saw a couple of matches where like the 2 Sultai opponents were just like, I'll cast my Crassus, I'll cast my Crassus, I'll kill your Crassus, I'll kill your Crassus. Like they want to just exchange threats so efficiently and trade removal, and like Biogenic Ooze just doesn't want to play that game.
Mm-mm.
So if you get to untap with it, especially late in the game, like you don't have to play cards anymore.
No,
you're just like, I'm making oozes and you got to answer it. And they quickly grow out of like even fine finality range. Like, yeah, I think like going forward, I agree that is the mirror breaker. I think you're going to see some number in the main, and I think you're going to see more like across the 75 no matter what.
And I'm a big fan of that because I Acidic Slime, unfortunately, not in the format currently. I wish it was. I would be figuring out ways to play Acidic Slime if it were here. Instead, we got to play the Ooze Lord, and I'm okay. Well, I'll play the Ooze Lord. I'm sad I can't play it in White Darby's Esper mid-range list because I really like that deck. But, sometimes you got to make choices. But if I'm playing a green deck, I'm playing Biogenic Ooze.
Let's take a look at a mono red deck. We'll look at Caleb Shearer's 10th place list. So this is kind of what it looks like right now. 4 Firebrand, 4 Lavamancer, 4 Pyromancer, 4 Chain Whirler, a lot of burn spells. 4 Skewer the... let's say this. Even though none of the super mono red decks did well, there were a couple builds of red that looked exciting on camera. There was a mono red Phoenix deck we'll talk about here in a little bit. whatever the red decks end up doing, Light Up the Stage, Skewer the Critics are real. Light Up the Stage was unreal so many times.
Yes, Light of the Stage is like Light of the Stage is a red divination. Like
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's all it is.
No, it's not though, because divination costs 3 all the time.
That's true. It's sometimes better than red divination. Sometimes it's red draw card that doesn't quite exist yet.
Red almost ancestral light. It's 2 cards for a mana. So that's a strong comparison, but a card consistently was doing just some bonkers things, and I think like it enables. Again, we have a couple other archetypes of red that I want to take a look at through these lists, but it's you're gonna play for them. You're gonna play mono red. You're gonna play for them.
Yes, 100%.
So, Skewer the Critics was just fine as a bolt, but I was impressed with how efficient between Skewer the Critics and Wizard's Lightning, how efficient some of mono red's turns could be.
Yeah,
right.
It's devastating.
Like if you get behind, like we talked about all these great cards that keep you in the game. If you don't have one of them though, like
You're dead.
Yeah, you just it's rough. So these red decks are efficient. You know, kudos to Wansey for being able to print these cards and not have a red deck immediately destroy the format. That's actually pretty impressive.
I agree with you there. But I think that is definitely credit to players being aware of like how absurdly powerful this is, which honestly Best of One on Arena really exposed that.
Oh yeah, that's true. I will say, so he only has 1 copy of Experimental Frenzy in his 75, and I think that's a card we just talked about how like, the way these decks are set up, these red decks are going to need more staying power, but how much of a liability is Experimental Frenzy when half the decks have Mortify?
Yeah.
So you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place, I think, as far as where you're doing with that.
And especially when Light of the Stage is just like a better of that effect in a way.
It's true. Oh my gosh, Light of the Stage was just bonkers. We'll come back to that in a little bit because I do want to talk about the mono red Phoenix list that did exist. Going through here, what else catches you? I know there was a Grixis control list in 15th place. That's our Niv Mizzet deck.
Quick shout out to Scotty Doolittle getting 18th place.
Yeah, I love that boy. Sorry, friend. I know I wasn't there. I wanted to be, but I'm very proud of you.
I know that a list that a lot of people have been talking about and like tweaking is Dylan Donegan's list in 11th place, his Sultai list. So I know that's been a lot of people's actual starting points with Sultai, so not necessarily even the winning list. Which I know that some of the changes that people...
Isn't this just exactly Abe Corrigan's list? Am I crazy?
It might be.
It's just exactly Abe Corrigan's list.
Fair enough. So Abe Corrigan / Dylan Donegan.
Yes.
But this is where a lot of people are starting.
Dylan Dorgan.
And people have been like, yeah, I started here, but I just added in the 4th Grasses because why are you playing 3?
Yeah.
Grixis Control, you said that was where our Niv Mizzet was.
That's our Niv Mizzet Crackling Drake control list.
Yeah, and more importantly, no... what's his face? Nicol Bolas.
Yeah, that's right. Where is Nicol Bolas in this format?
He gone.
Yeah, that's sad.
He left. Honestly, I think like
he'll be back in War of the Sport.
100%, but he'll just be a straight up planeswalker that maybe people. I think like he in the format we've gotten Mortify and we've just gotten a lot of more options to kind of deal with that. I just think like he's too much of a liability.
I mean, even this deck we see Bedevil finally showing up, and again that card's hyper efficient for that too. So
I'm genuinely surprised that there just aren't more Bedevils floating around. It maybe that card just can't hang with the sort of where the rest of the format's shaking out.
If Esper's your control deck, then it gets a little bit tougher because the Rakdos aggro decks, which is a couple, there's one in 19th place. They're Rakdos in the lightest sense of the word, and the double black on Bedevil is pretty difficult.
Yeah, you don't really have a true Jund deck.
Here's the thing: we didn't see Spawn of Mayhem this weekend at all.
No.
And if you're going to see Spawn of Mayhem, that's probably where you're going to see your Bedevil. We did see a Jund deck, but it was base red. It was almost entirely red. That was
correct.
Jim Davis. So, you just said that. I'm sorry. So I want to go back to something I said before, many moons ago, that Crackling Drake was Nicol Bolas, right? 4 mana X4 that you gained a card as opposed to discarding a card. And when you look at like the Basilica Bellhaunt, 4 mana 3/4, they discard a card, you gain some life. Obviously the flip side of Nicol Bolas is powerful. It's a 4/4 with flying that's very powerful. But when you look at some of these other possibly easier to cast cards, depending, which is hilarious, the power level difference of these uncommons right now in the format is on par with the Mythic.
That's true.
So it's kind of awkward to say that, but yeah. Want to talk about 4-color gates?
Yes,
20th
please.
place? Yeah, okay, because that's a deck that was getting some buzz, and this deck is sweet.
I think Gates is. They did it. So like
I'm so happy.
So hats off to Wizards. I know we bashed on them a lot during this podcast, but hats off to them.
This is the
to
Tale
make,
of Tuca podcast. I don't tell you.
Yeah, whatever. We could be walking hypocrites. It's fine. We've made peace with it. We're Americans.
I'm fat. I mean, like whatever.
but they made it. They made it work. You could play a Gates deck. And it's not like a silly, assemble all the gates and win like Maze's End deck. It's legitimate. And having played against the deck in Arena, it has some absurd draws, and people have compared it. And I don't think like they're wrong in comparing it to something like Tron in Standard, because we didn't talk about Gate Colossus in our set review. I know we didn't talk about Gate Colossus.
No, I know. I'm probably putting in Battle Box now. I've been convinced, but.
Gate Colossus is kind of a beating.
Well, Gate Colossus and Gatebreaker Ram too.
Yeah.
Like if you played in limited Gate, Gate Colossus is maybe tougher to get to, but if you've built the right deck, like you should know the power of Gatebreaker Ram. Like Gatebreaker Ram is a 3-mana 4/4, 5/5, 6/6 in this deck. I mean, you're
3-mana big.
Yeah, and you have that, and then Gate Colossus like itself is 8 mana, but of course it costs 1 less for each of your gates, and all of a sudden you're like.
Oh, it's like eventually it's just free.
Yeah,
and it comes back.
Oh, every turn. It is crazy. And like here's the thing too, like it comes back, and with Guild Summit in play, it comes back that turn. You're just like, I'll play this gate. I'll stack my triggers so that my Gate Colossus on top of my library. I'll draw a card.
It's
here's my Gate Colossus. Oh, you killed it? Guess what? So
and obviously the true glue that kind of keeps everything together, in my opinion, is 100% Gates Ablaze. Like having that scaling Wrath spell is a big deal.
It really is.
And you would think, like, you play against this deck and you hear about a Gates deck and you're like, oh my gosh, like that has to be so slow, but it's just not. Like for some reason, it's just so absurdly like still on par with you playing like just a regular mana base. It blows your mind. And a lot of that has to do with Growth Spiral.
That's definitely true.
So being able for them to consistently be a land ahead of you negates their lands coming in and tapped, and still allows them to play the same game as you.
Mm-hmm. And like they go from Growth Spiral directly into Circuitous Route.
Yeah.
And like you again, same thing. You think they'd be behind you, but they're way ahead of you.
No.
And the draws where they weave a Guild Summit into that, they're not they are taking their turn to ramp, but unlike traditional ramp decks, they're not losing cards out of that. Like the ramp decks that just like played like Explosive Vegetation and then they didn't have a threat to stick and they were just out of cards. Guild Summit says no, that's never happening. But they also get to play Expansion Explosion for Hydroid Crassus. Like they got a lot of cards.
I think there's so many so this deck in particular has so many X spells. But like I played against this deck playing the Esper midrange list and like thought erasured them, and they had like Expansion Explosion, Hydroid Crassus, and like maybe a Gate Colossus or something else, some other win condition. I was like, I'm just dead.
Yeah,
like,
okay, cool.
You are going so far over the top of anything that I could do in a midrange list. Like I'm done. I'm smoked.
And like look at these poor aggro decks that like again we looked at like Caleb Shearer's list, right? Like so say you get Gates Ablazed, right? And like maybe you get this guy to a low life total, right? And then he just goes
Archway Angel.
Gain
10.
Gain 10. Like what? What?
Gain 10 having 3/4.
Like you're just like cool. Hey, look at all those cards you used. They meant nothing.
Absolutely zero. Good job.
I in the Palooza was so hopeful for a Gate deck, and to see this come together,
Here you are.
I'm just so happy. Hey, look at this format. Look at all the decks we're talking about.
Yeah.
God
100%.
blessed. Give us more Standard tournaments and keep covering.
But yeah, I think like this deck is really cool. It is relatively cheap comparatively to some of the other decks in the format as well, so I think that's nice. I mean, you don't have to like bust the bank on your mana base or anything like that. You get to play some cool cards. And I'll tell you what, Mass Manipulation, don't underrate that card. It could be a beating if you steal like two Planeswalkers or something like that. It's absurd.
I mean, you steal 2 of anything, like that's pretty much game over. But
yeah, but I do like what this deck is doing, and I will eventually I have most of the cards. Like the weird thing about Arena though is you have to if you don't draft, you have to craft your own gates because you can't open gates in packs like prize packs or packs you buy from the store.
Right.
So that's awkward. But it's still just theoretically you have a lot of common.
I've drafted
wild
enough
cards
already. I have all the gates. So
right,
it's all good.
exactly. And you could just I have to draft like drats. But I'm tempted to build this on Arena and like maybe take it out for a spin or two and see what's what. See if it's really like playing Tron. But I think like if you're looking for a ramp deck in the format, that this looks like a ramp deck.
Yeah, it certainly does.
It has everything that when I think about like traditional ramp decks that we've seen historically in Standard, it has a lot of the same pieces. And I mean, you have the best ramp card probably ever printed, at least in the past, I would say 3 years, in Standard, which is Hydroid Crassus.
Yeah.
So, the door just opened, so we're trying to see if Rush will bark, if he wants to be part of this podcast or not. I think we're good.
He's all right. He's doing okay.
All right, I think we're okay for now.
Okay, it's all right. Cool. It is my wife. So
right, fair enough.
So it's calming the here. So that's good. It's fair. Let's talk about a few more lists here because I know we're long in the tooth, aren't we?
100%.
Yeah,
we
okay.
still have like at least I do want to talk a little bit of the Modern Classics.
Yeah, absolutely. Rakdos Aggro in 23rd place. This is this and the Mono Red Phoenix deck, and I'll at least talk about both of them. A lot of decks playing main deck Electrostatic Field. The Mono Red Phoenix deck was playing Gutter Snipe. This is a straight up burn deck playing both Sovereign's Bite and Sword Point Diplomacy. It has Theater of Horrors on the board. I was playing around with some to see if there are burn decks, and I think it's interesting. And it's pretty straightforward. The Phoenix version of it was playing 4 Arclight Phoenix, 4 Runaway Steamkin, and it was playing like all the 1-mana cycling cards and all. And we watched that deck on coverage beat a board of Shalai Lyra, where those 2 cards got to attack. So he was playing a burn deck that couldn't target the player, and he killed him.
Yeah.
Because they have Gutter Snipe, he had 2 Gutter Snipes and an Electrostatic Field, and he was just like, cycle, take 5, cycle, take 5. And it was just like, it's like, oh my gosh, he's going to do this. And then it was like, light up the stage, take 5. Oh, I have 2 more cards to look at. It was terrifying.
And having played against some of those decks that can do this, they just amass like a bunch of ways to just, like kill you with 1,000 cuts, and then you can't do anything about it. Like you think you can hide behind a Shalai or a life gain, and like you're taking 5 damage every time they cast a spell. It's just absurd.
Yeah, we watched them do it one game, and they did the second game again. A red deck winning that way through a Shalai, it had me. I was believing. I was like, okay, you know what, you got me. I don't think Phoenix is the right place because it only had Tormenting Voice as a discard outlet, so I think there's other ways to build it. Also, neither of these lists are playing any amount of Rixmati Reveler, which I think is a card I like to experiment with in these decks.
Yeah.
But I love the splash for Theater of Horrors, and I'm excited to play around with some of these decks.
I love the Pestilent Spirit in the sideboard of the Rakdos
yeah.
list. Like that card was like weird when we first saw it, obviously, and that's a powerful rider. Last time we saw that was on a Mythic Rare, if you don't count like Unstable.
Sure.
But this is pretty interesting and has a lot of interesting like implications with things like Fiery Cannonade and being able to kill like Carnage Tyrant with like 2 cards is fairly.
Well, I think even more than that. I just said that Wild Growth Walker was essentially Tarmogoyf, and so many decks are trying to figure out how to beat it. It's like, well, I'll shock it. Yeah. And it died.
My shock had Death Touch. It's weird.
So I think that's cool. Let's switch over to the Classic just really quick, so we can talk about a couple other decks that we're close, even if we don't go too far, because I know we're in a lot of things. One of the decks that got a ton of buzz and did day 2 a fair number of lists, but it didn't really finish well, was Bant Nexus. It did finish in 2nd place in the Classic. It was won by Esper Control Raja Suleiman, but Andrew Hackenworth played Bant Nexus. And this is a deck that was kind of the boogeyman, honestly. Right, this is where you have your Wilderness Reclamation. We saw Todd Anderson Wilderness Reclamation deck early on day 1 do some things, and then he petered out. He didn't get past 4 wins.
No, yeah, he dropped at 4 and 3.
And we saw a lot of these Nexus of Fate decks multiple times against. What I thought was interesting, and again going back to this best of 3 idea, in sideboarded games against light permission, not being able to finish what they were doing. We watched them like chain a bunch of cards together and then like couldn't beat the negate or the disdainful stroke or the duress, and I think that tells you all you need to know about the best one versus best of 3. But this deck still, is still finished in 2nd place in the Classic. So sometimes people are just going to take all the turns.
But I mean, like I like how this deck is set up. I think this deck has a a couple of good win conditions. Obviously, the Hydroid Crassus is your big one, but also a Dawn of Hope as a incremental way that you can generate advantage, especially with Reclamation. That's a way that you can create a bunch of tokens, untap your lands, take your turn, and like finish out games. Like I think like that is the most annoying thing about some of the Bant Nexus play patterns that you see in Best of One is like they don't play win conditions. Like they want you to concede out of like frustration, and most of the times that's correct. You feel salty because like you just want to say like, man, if you were doing this on Magic Online, you'd lose, and like you just got to get that out of your head. But I like the Dawn of Hope as being a potential win condition,
right?
Because you eventually get to it, and it's hard to interact with, and eventually, it's going to kill them,
right?
But yeah, I think I don't really like these decks. I don't like the Nexus of Fate. We never liked it. It was always a bad choice.
Yeah, this didn't fix it. We were like, oh, now it's useful. Like, nope, it's actually worse. So
yeah, 100%. But if that's something you want to do, I guess go for it.
Prepare to get negated. I want to quickly mention Mono Blue Aggro in third place by Mason Hoos. This is the deck that a version of this deck is what I've been laddering with, just because it was really easy to make. I love the fact that if you look at the Magic Online price of this deck, it's 4.88 tickets.
So cheap.
So there you go.
I think it's probably more of a cost theoretically to build this on Arena because you have to like spend 4 wild cards.
So I had to spend wild cards on Tempest Djinn, and that was pretty much it. So I felt pretty good about that. No, I take it back. I had to spend it on uncommon ones on Merfolk Trickster. I didn't play any Dominaria on Arena.
Yeah.
But he has the inclusion of Terramander, which is a natural fit, I think, for Mono Blue. It gives you a little bit more outs in games that go long because this deck isn't really designed to do that. But if it goes a little bit longer, then you essentially have extra copies of Tempest Djinn you can draw.
Yeah, you have a more considerable threat in the late game.
And I want to talk about Essence Capture, which is a card we talked about a little bit in the Palooza, and I mentioned this is the deck for it. Having been a person playing Mono Blue and casting Essence Capture, oh my gosh. And like even the decks where you'd be surprised, because I think a lot of people, even former host of the show Dave, has said that he's like, well, isn't it just bad against red? It's like, well, the play patterns are pretty important, and like if you can Essence Capture against red when you have a 1/1 creature early on, then you can protect it and play around even like Goblin Chain Whirler where you couldn't ever dream of doing that before. So
right.
I think it's pretty sweet. I like this deck a fair amount. Like it still doesn't do well when it plays from behind, so like it's a classic tempo deck in that sense. But there's still something very powerful about just going like, here's my Mistcloak Herald, here's my Curious Obsession. Can you do anything about it? Because if you can't kill it, you don't have a chance to win this game.
Right.
So
and like that's definitely how it feels when you're playing against it. Like you have to have some interaction, and for the most part, you always just feel bad. You're like, oh, you're gonna have the Spell Pierce here. You're gonna have the Dive Down. You're just like, oh, blow out.
I just like laddering with this deck. Like I can't tell you how many times like I just like open a hand. It's like 2 islands, 1 drop, Curious Obsession, Dive Down. I was like, that's it. I can open a mold of 5. Don't even care. Like so,
yeah. That's genuinely how it feels.
So, any other thing else? There's a Sultai Climb deck. I know that was a card that saw some play at least on day 1. With a number of things, easy to flip, can get a lot of damage through. Definitely got to see it like make a Carnage Tyrant fly, which was
got wings.
And ain't nobody seen no Carnage Tyrant fly because it's like Dumbo.
I get it. I get it.
He's got big dino ears.
I think like that card was popular in a lot of people's lists, but going forward, I don't think that's going to be adopted in my opinion.
Also, it's fair. Sorry not to change. Shout out to Bob Culp.
Yeah.
7th place. I know he has been pushing really, really hard. He's an indie-based grinder who's just a quality guy. He's been working really, really hard, worked hard on this format, didn't do well in the open, made some changes, and got his first top 8. So congrats to him. A lot of hard work. And he's a guy who even at what was it? I don't know what GP that was. Maybe it was indie. Like he was a guy who was really close to top 8. I think he top 16 the GP. Like he's had a lot of near misses and has been working. So it's good to see his name get up here and hopefully keeps pushing.
Yeah, gets the works his way up to getting an open top 8.
Yeah, get that sweet trophy.
All right.
Or, well, I mean, assuming you're playing SCG events, because
Correct. I mean,
otherwise you just get a picture. All right, let's finish up because we're so close.
we are so close. I want to talk about Modern.
All right.
It was won by Dredge, which,
We
not surprising. Dredge is just absurdly, can be absurdly powerful. It did defeat Azorius Control, and Azorius Control definitely had. Oh, you know what? They skimped on Rest in Pieces.
Oh, they
only
messed
had,
up.
They only had 2, not the full 4 set. And I think this might have been. They thought that they could skimp
because of Ironworks.
because Ironworks didn't
and Dredge was there to say, no, sir.
No, you still need all of these. But I didn't actually look at the Dredge list to see if there's anything that was new and spicy. But I would bet that there was not.
No, this there are some cards that we can that we can look at for Modern from Ravnica Allegiance. Terramander is one that comes to mind, maybe. But overall, we just saw a format sort of reshaping after a ban. So
First and foremost, shout out to Ray Perez. Getting
no, you know what? No.
No? Are we changing our stance on Ray Perez?
No, I'm still pro Ray, but I reduced the shout out because stop playing monster decks.
But he's a fan of the show, and we're a fan of him.
Here's the thing. I like Michael Coyle too. I know that guy. Still poo poo on him. He also top aided with War Prison.
Listen,
are you guys out to just make sure that the Mox Opal gets banned? Because that's how you get Mox Opal banned.
That's true. But he started something. He's gotten other people to play War Prison decks.
What is wrong with you? You're just trying to get people to buy into a deck so they can get punished. You're a Pied Piper of Death.
That's amazing. Shout out to both those people, though.
Yeah,
obviously
congrats on
doing well in the tournament.
Yeah, great job. But monsters.
I agree. I agree. But
that's fine. Keep playing them. I'm just gonna cast Lightning Bolt.
So I wanted to talk about Ryan Ferry's burn deck because it is a little bit divergent. There's
a Fairy burn deck.
No, it's a little divergent, but it's pretty exciting. In many different ways.
Okay.
So the creature suite looks very much the same as you would expect to see. We have the regular 14 creatures that you would see. Sometimes you see 13 because they only play 1 Grim Lavamancer, but lately it's been 2. The mana base is vastly different, though. 9 mountains and 10 fetch lands?
10 fetch lands. Yeah.
10 red fetches. That is your mana base.
Yeah,
you're not playing shocks.
No shocks.
You're not playing fast lands. You're not splashing a color main deck. And this is where we see the spell suite, and this is a burn deck. We have Lightning Bolts, Searing Blaze, Shard Volley, Lava Spike, Rift Bolt, 4 Light Up the Stage, 4 Skewer the Critics.
Yeah.
That's 8 new cards being introduced to the burn and really kind of transforming what you could potentially play as a burn deck and being successful with it, being successful in a classic. And I think that says a lot of how powerful those red cards were. They're not just powerful in standard, they are powerful in modern. If you can consistently enable them, I think you can.
Wait, 1 mana look at draw 2 cards is good in other formats.
Yeah,
too?
it's wild. But people were really trying to figure out how where on the line was Skewer the Critics. How much is this going to be a bad Rift Bolt or a bad Lightning Bolt? Bad Lightning Bolt still better than bad Rift Bolt, I guess.
Bad Lightning Bolt's better than good Shock.
Yeah, exactly. So and I think it was pretty convincingly decided that most of the time this is just going to be good. It's always going to be 1 mana, and I think it's really cool. I think it's really kind of fun to see from a burn deck and to be successful with changing so drastically into modern. In the sideboard, that's where we see some splashes. That's where we see our Blood Crypt and our Sacred Foundry for things like Path to Exile, Rest in Peace, and Rakdos Charm.
Yeah, 4 of Rakdos Charm.
Yeah. I know that. I wonder what this is. I mean, it covers a lot of bases, to be perfectly honest. It's additional graveyard hate. It destroys an artifact, and it can burn people out.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's very powerful against Dredge. Like I said, it can shut off Dredge, or it can be a 5, 6, 7 point burn spell against Dredge. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think it's also got some interesting application against even like a Bant Spirits. Maybe you want something to interact with Ether Vial, and so again, Unified Will gets brought in as creature for those counter spells. This gets brought in when you might have, if you're going to have 4 or 5 creatures in play. Well, I'm
Yeah.
going to deal 5 damage to you for 2 mana. So
That's very true.
I also like putting those shocks in the sideboard because you can definitely, like, once you show your opponent all mountains, show them like light of the stage and stuff, you like things like Rest in Peace, you can put somebody at ease, and all of a sudden it's just like fetch shock, Rest in Peace, and you're like, oh, you did have this, right?
Yes.
And like, man, when you get them, you're going to get them hard. So I think I didn't look at this list. Thank you for showing me. That's awesome.
No, I checked out Burn. I was like, well, how well did Burn do? What does it look like? And that's one version. But
There's another version playing Screw the Critics.
that I think all of them.
Richard Mulligan had 4 copies in 12th
Yes,
place.
Richard Mulligan is playing a Black Splash.
Yeah, I saw he has a Bump of the Night.
Correct. So he's just like all the lava spikes.
Jordan Tortora is not, but Donnie Wise is in 14th place playing Screw the Critics. But only Fairies is playing the Light of the Stage. I have to, man, that's interesting because like in modern Burn, like that's going to be close to a turn to cast that spell.
Yeah.
Right? So does it give you, like, are you trading speed, too much speed to cast that card? But I think the other thing it lets you do is, like, in a deck that's already skimping on mana so much, like, it does let you play your land drops, which sort of gets you some of those, because there's a lot of games where you just end up on 2 mana, and you have to navigate those games on 2 mana.
Yeah.
And Light of the Stage increases your likelihood of hitting land drop 3, which sort of mitigates that. So I have to assume that, like, it's pretty close.
Man, I have to imagine that like casting this and then like getting like just it taking 2 lands off the top of your deck every once in a while. Like obviously, like you never know what that third card's going to be, but
Still.
it probably feels pretty all right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that build. That's cool.
I think it's really cool too. I think like it's definitely divergent. And there has to be. I think you should definitely pursue like testing with it and see what your results are.
Yeah,
But I think like there's potential there.
And I think when you look at the format, like even looking at this top 16, you had things like Death Shadow, but things like Band Spirits, Elves, things where like you already kind of want Grim Lavamancer, and Grim Lavamancer is so good with these 2 cards. Like so good with Skewer and with Light of the Stage. So
100%.
but they give us that one back for standard.
When when we talk about Mono Red Phoenix and Burn and how close they are, this version of Burn gets closer, I feel, to Mono Red Phoenix.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I definitely have wanted to try Light of the Stage in Mono Red Phoenix. My only fear being that you put Phoenixes out there.
Obviously, like that's a genuine concern.
But like you're boarding out of some number of Phoenixes so often that like you're just a burn deck that has nutty draws. I still don't know if Skewer is what you want for that, just because like you're not replacing Fiery Temper and you're already not playing Rift Bolt.
I think like your argument against it is you get to play Fiery Temper,
right? Exactly.
For basically like free.
But Light of the Stage, like those turns where you, especially the version I've been playing that plays like the mana like accelerants, like I definitely want to try it. So that's spicy. You definitely shout it. Thank you for shouting. Ryan Ferries, good job, bud. That is an exciting burn deck.
I keep an eye on burn decks when new formats come out, because I knew like I wanted to see like if Skewer the Critics was going to make it, but I was surprised to see Light of the Stage.
Yeah.
And I want to play that.
Maybe it shouldn't be though. Like
yeah, potentially, but that's like if I play burn in any modern thing, that's the version I want to play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think just like seeing the play patterns and just even playing with it limited now, but seeing the play patterns in a standard tournament, I think like that's just going to be where we're at. So
another person's entering the house. So Rush seems pretty chill about it, though.
Rush.
Rush, well, what do you think about Light of the Stage?
Oh, it's really good.
What about Skewer the Critics?
Oh, less excited.
Less excited. Oh, well, more excited. Less excited.
The sound of the dog means it's time to end the show.
That's true. That's how we signify all of our new show endings. Is by Rush barking.
That's not true. Please don't be the person who's like, oh, please don't let a live dog bark each episode.
Barking and growling, the best part. But yeah, so let's talk about what's happening over the weekend. So we have Star City Games Baltimore, which is going to be team constructed, and we also have Magic Fest Sydney, which is going to be limited.
I've decided I'm never deleting that oof after Magic Fest.
Just leave it there.
Stay there forever.
But yeah, that's going to be the tournaments that are going to be happening over the weekend. I'm pretty excited to watch more Star City Games coverage. I'll leave it at that. So that's going to be everything that we have for our show today. If you want, we have a few things that you can do. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so. We have a Twitter. It's Your End Step. When you add us, it's at Your End Step. We also have an email address at yourendstep@gmail.com. And then lastly, we have Facebook, which is facebook.com/@yourendstep. Pretty easy. While you're on Facebook, check out our lovely sponsor, Comic Town. You can visit them at Comic Town Gaming Center. You can be listening to us if you have many platforms. One of them is iTunes, so feel free to leave us a rating and a review on there. Or you might be listening to us via Legit MTG.
Yeah, we haven't gone up there yet. I've been lazy. I apologize. I'm fixing it though.
It's fine. We'll eventually get up there. We were very appreciative of them being another source for people to get exposure to our show. So if you are listening to us on there, give us a shout out. Well, let's see how many people we can reach from it once we're actually on that actual website. Yeah. We also have a Patreon. You can check that out at patreon.com/@YourEnSub. You can get a couple benefits for supporting the show, and we won't want to give a very special shout out to all of our patrons that help us produce the show every month. You definitely help keep the lights on here at the old At Your End home. But that's going to be everything for us this week, and we'll catch you next time. You have a great one. Bye.